so quiet that the fire's crackling started to sound too loud, like it didn't belong in that kind of silence. It must have been around 2 in the morning when I woke up. At first, I thought it was a dream. That stupid tune, the kind that gets stuck in your head when you're a kid. An ice cream truck song, distant, but getting louder. I sat up fast. Nate was awake too, flashlight in hand, looking around like he already knew it wasn't supposed to be there. We were in the middle of nowhere. There wasn't even a road close enough for a car, let alone a truck. The song got closer, clearer, echoing through the trees. It wasn't cheerful anymore. Something about it felt off. Notes dragging like a warped tape. I could almost hear a voice under the music, something like crying, but I couldn't tell if it was real or just my brain trying to fill the silence between the broken notes. Nate whispered that we should hide, and I didn't argue. We killed the fire, crouched behind a fallen tree, and waited. The sound rolled closer until faint headlights cut through the trees, slow and deliberate, like whoever was driving knew we were there. It stopped less than 50 meters away. We set up camp near a dry creek bed, miles away from any town. The fire was small, just enough to keep the bugs away. Nate was sitting across from me, chewing on a piece of jerky like it was the last meal. We hadn't spoken much since sunset. He said the silence was peaceful. To me, it felt heavy, like the woods were waiting for something. It was supposed to be a short weekend trip, a chance to get away from the noise of the city. We'd driven 6 hours just to find a place without a cell signal. No traffic, no lights, just trees and dirt. The kind of place where if something happened to you, nobody would find out for days. By midnight, the forest was pitch black beyond the glow of the fire. I lay in my sleeping bag listening to Nate snore. Every so often, I'd hear twigs snap far off in the dark. Maybe animals, maybe wind. Out here, it was hard to tell what was alive and what had just moved because the forest wanted it to. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to sleep. The last thing I remember before drifting off was how quiet it got. I could see the shape now. White paint stained with brown streaks, like old rust or dried mud. The speaker on top of the truck just kept repeating the same jingle, each loop more distorted than the last. The doors opened. 2 men stepped out wearing dirty ice cream vendor uniforms, faces covered by oversized mascot heads. One was a clown. The other looked like a melting popsicle with holes where the eyes should have been. They moved slowly, carrying shovels. Behind them, the crying sound grew louder. For a moment, I thought maybe someone was hurt inside. Then I saw a small hand pressed against the truck's window. A child's hand. There were more faces behind it. Kids, terrified, huddled together. Nate grabbed my arm and hissed that we had to go. But I couldn't. Something in me locked. I didn't think about how stupid it was. I just knew I couldn't walk away. I told him to stay put and crept forward, keeping low. Every step I took made my chest tighter. The men started digging, not saying a word to each other, just shoveling dirt like it was routine. The crying from inside the truck didn't stop. The tension felt unbearable. I was close enough now to hear the wet sound of metal hitting soil. I wanted to yell, but my voice was gone. My throat had dried up completely. I forced myself forward, trying to keep calm, trying not to make a sound. One of the men stopped digging and tilted his head like he heard me. He turned slowly, the mascot head twitching slightly to the side. Then he started walking toward the truck as if ignoring me. I moved closer to the back door. Heart pounding so hard it hurt. When I reached the handle, I pulled it open and froze. Inside, there were maybe 7 kids, none older than 10. Their faces were pale, clothes torn. They didn't scream when they saw me. They just stared like they didn't know if I was real. I tried to whisper that I'd help them, but before I could finish, something slammed into the side of my face. I hit the ground hard, my ears ringing. The clown mask was above me, shovel raised. I rolled to the side, but the second man was already there. My leg went numb when the shovel came down again, this time across my ribs. I screamed, tried to crawl, but another blow hit my shoulder. I remember the dirt against my teeth, the sound of the jingle still playing, looping endlessly as they kept hitting me. They dragged me a few meters away, my head spinning so bad I couldn't tell up from down. I felt them dig, fast and practiced. The hole wasn't deep, but it didn't need to be. One of them pressed his hand on my neck to check my pulse. The other laughed quietly, the kind of laugh you hear from someone who doesn't see you as human. When they dropped me into the hole, my back hit the cold dirt. I tried to move, but couldn't. My vision flickered, black, then red, then nothing but a blur of sky. I felt the first handful of dirt hit my face, then another. It got heavier fast. At first, I could still breathe. The air smelled like wet soil and blood. Then it got harder. Each breath was shallow. My body tried to jerk, to push up, but the weight pressed down. Dirt filled my mouth. I could hear the muffled crying of the kids somewhere nearby. The jingle had finally stopped. Only the dinging continued. I don't know how long I was under before I passed out. My last clear thought was that I didn't want my body to rot here nameless next to whatever graves they'd dug before mine. When I woke up, I couldn't see anything. Everything was heavy and silent, but I could still move one hand, barely. My fingers brushed against the packed dirt. It took everything I had to move even a little. My chest burnt with every breath, like my ribs were stabbing my lungs. Then, gunshots, distant but real. 2 of them. Then shouting. A man's voice yelling orders. I clawed at the dirt above me, trying to push through, even if it tore my nails off. I managed to get my hand halfway out. Cold air hit my skin. Footsteps ran past, then Nate's voice. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew it was him. I moved my fingers barely. He saw. The next thing I remember was the dirt being ripped away from my face, light stabbing my eyes. Nate was there, and 2 men in ranger uniforms were with him. They pulled me out, and I collapsed, coughing up mud. The rangers kept their guns pointed toward the truck. The kids were still alive, shaken, crying, but alive. The mascots were on the ground, one dead, the other bleeding out, still holding the shovel. Later, one of the rangers told Nate they weren't supposed to carry guns. They'd heard reports of strange vehicles and missing kids, so they started patrolling armed, just in case. That night, it saved all of us. By morning, the police arrived. They taped off the area, counted the graves. There were 12. 12 before me. I watched them carry out the kids, each wrapped in a blanket. They said the truck had no plates. The men had fake IDs. Nobody knew where they came from. The jingle still played when they towed the truck away. Nobody touched the speaker. It just kept looping by itself until the battery finally died. Nate didn't talk much after that. Neither did I. We stayed at a ranger station for 2 days before heading home. We never talked again. It's not like he tried, and I know he saved me, but he left me to die in the first place. Was it my fault to rush there to save the kids? Probably. But he was my friend, and he wasn't there.
I sell ice cream from a truck. Nothing fancy, just a metal box that stinks of sugar and diesel. Every afternoon I park near the park and wait for kids to scream their orders. It's the same noise every day. The hum of the generator, the music that loops until it drills into your skull, and the sound of coins hitting the counter. I don't think much while I work. I just scoop, hand over the cone, take the cash, and wait for the next one. That day was like any other. Too hot, too bright. The inside of the truck felt like standing inside a freezer full of sweat. Around 6, when the crowd usually thins out, a man appeared. I noticed him because he didn't move like the rest. He didn't even blink when he stared at the tubs. He just stood there, pale, thin, and shaking slightly like he hadn't eaten in days. When I asked what he wanted, he pointed at everything. Every single flavor. I laughed at first, but he didn't react. I filled the cups one after another until my hands hurt from scooping. He watched the whole thing like a predator waiting for the right moment. When I gave him the bags, he pressed them against his face and walked away without a word. I should have locked the truck and gone home early. He came back the next day. Same hour, same look. His skin was worse this time, sweaty and red, like he'd been running a fever. He didn't say a thing, just pointed at the freezer again. I told him I was low on stock, that I couldn't sell that much. He didn't move. His breathing was loud, heavy, almost animal. I gave him a few scoops to make him leave. He took them, turned around slowly, and walked off. When the door shut, I stayed there, frozen. I don't know why, but my hands were shaking. I tried to laugh it off, told myself he was just some addict or drifter, but something about him stuck in my head. The way he stared at the cold like he worshipped it. That night I dreamt of the freezer. In the dream, I was trapped inside it, surrounded by tubs of melted colors. I could hear someone breathing under the ice, and it was hungry. I woke up sweating, the smell of sweet cream still in my throat. I should have stayed home the next day, but I didn't. When I parked again, he was already waiting, not near the sidewalk this time, right in the middle of the street, like he'd been standing there for hours. His eyes looked hollow, his lips were blue, and his shirt was covered in stains I didn't want to identify. I almost drove away, but I didn't. I opened the window. He climbed closer without saying a thing. His breathing rattled like a broken engine. He pointed at the tubs again. I told him no. I didn't even finish the word before he moved. His hands slammed against the counter so hard that the metal bent inward. The sound echoed inside the truck like a gunshot. My throat went dry. I backed up toward the freezer door, but he climbed halfway into the service window. The generator hummed behind me. The light flickered once, and he was already inside. Everything slowed down after that. His body hit mine, knocking me into the freezer. His hands grabbed my neck. I smelled his breath. It reeked of spoiled milk and sugar. He shoved my face into a tub of vanilla. The cold hit like a punch. My mouth filled instantly. I tried to breathe and swallowed nothing but frozen air and cream. My chest screamed for oxygen. I kicked, clawed, pushed back. He didn't even flinch. His hands were shaking, but his strength was unreal. I could hear him mumbling something, words I couldn't understand. My vision started to go dark. He pulled my head up for a second, and I coughed out chunks of ice cream, blood, and spit. The pain in my chest was unbearable. I could barely see. Then he slammed me down again, this time into chocolate. The freezing pain made me gasp, and more ice cream forced its way into my nose. I thought I was going to pass out. I heard voices outside, the neighbors probably, feet running toward the truck. The door slid open and someone shouted. I tried to move, but he lifted me by the collar like I weighed nothing and threw me against the counter. The metal cracked. I heard someone enter behind him. Then screams. He turned on them like an animal. One man barely stepped inside before being tossed out through the open door. Then another tried to grab him from behind, but the stranger smashed his head into the freezer so hard that the lid broke off. The sound of skull against metal is something I'll never forget. The whole truck shook. I was crawling toward the driver's seat, half blind, my lungs burning, my throat raw from the cold. My hand slipped on melted cream mixed with blood. I reached for the window. I thought I could make it. I almost did. He grabbed my legs and dragged me back. My knees scraped against the metal floor. I kicked, screamed, clawed at the frame, but he was stronger. I could feel his nails cutting into my ankles. He pulled me toward the freezer again, panting like a dying dog. He shoved me down beside the tubs and started eating straight from them. No spoon, no hesitation, just handfuls of ice cream stuffed into his mouth, his teeth grinding against the frozen surface until they cracked. Blood poured from his gums, mixing with the colors. He didn't care. He just kept eating, shaking violently like he was trying to feed something inside him that wouldn't stop screaming. He looked at me once, and I saw his face covered in red and white, chunks of ice and blood dripping from his chin. His pupils were wide and glassy, and I realized he wasn't even looking at me. He was looking through me. I tried to crawl again, but he slammed his fist down on my chest, knocking the air out of me. I thought he'd killed me right there. The only sound in the truck was his chewing and the dull hum of the generator. Then, faintly, I heard sirens. He froze. For a few seconds, he didn't move. Then he started shoving more ice cream into his mouth, faster, desperate, like he needed to eat all of it before they arrived. His breathing turned sharp, ragged and high-pitched. His hands bled as he scraped the tubs empty. The police arrived fast. The blue lights flashed through the truck windows. I couldn't move. My body felt like it was made of concrete. When they opened the back door, they found him kneeling in front of the freezer, his mouth full, his eyes rolled back. He didn't react when they shouted. He just laughed through a mouthful of melted ice cream. They dragged him out, kicking and laughing, the sound wet and broken. Even while cuffed, he kept reaching for the freezer, trying to scoop more from the air. When they finally got him outside, I could see the state of the truck. Tubs overturned, floors soaked, blood and melted sugar covering everything. I sat there, shaking, my throat raw, face swollen. I remember staring at the freezer, completely empty. Not a single trace left. The air inside was freezing cold, even though the generator had stopped. They told me later he'd eaten until his body gave up, that his stomach had ruptured before they even got him to the station. He was still smiling when he died.
I was 16 when I started buying ice cream from that truck. It came every afternoon around 5. Kids loved it. Parents trusted the guy who drove it because he'd been around for years. His name was Mr. Hale. He was always quiet, always smiling too much. People thought he was just awkward. I thought so too. The weird part was the flavors. He had too many. Most ice cream trucks around here had maybe 8 or 9 options. He had more than 20. Some of them had names I'd never heard before. Things like Tommy's Delight, Rachel's Cream, Milo's Mix. They sounded like jokes or homemade flavors, but each name sounded like someone's name. He lived only 3 blocks away from me. I found that out one day when the truck broke down near the end of his route. He walked home pushing a cart full of empty tubs. I followed him without thinking much about it. I just wanted to know where he kept all that ice cream. When he went inside his house, I waited behind his fence for a while. The truck stayed parked outside. I remember thinking, what if I just look around? Just a quick look, that's all I wanted. That's what I told myself anyway. The back door wasn't locked. I pushed it open and went straight into his garage. It smelled sweet at first, but not in a good way. Too strong, like something that had gone bad under the sugar. The lights were off except for one lamp on a workbench. There were big plastic tubs stacked everywhere with white labels on them. Each label had a name written in black marker. First names, nothing else. It looked like he was making special orders. For a second, that's what I thought. Then I saw the pictures. Next to some of the tubs were small printed photos taped to the lids. Faces, smiling faces. I recognized two of them from missing posters around town. The girl from the gas station, the guy who disappeared after work last summer. I remember just staring at the photos, not really believing they were real. My hands started shaking. I told myself to get out, to just walk away, but I couldn't move. I needed to know what was inside one of those tubs. I stood there for a moment, just trying to breathe normal again. The house was silent. I didn't hear Mr. Hale anywhere. I picked one tub at random. The name said Jacob, and below it, Chocolate Swirl. I opened it. It looked like regular ice cream, brown and smooth. I leaned closer. The smell hit me like metal mixed with milk. I thought maybe it was spoiled. I dipped a finger in, tasted a little, and that was enough. The flavor wasn't right. The texture was oily, heavy. Beneath the chocolate was something salty, like blood. My stomach turned fast. It all clicked. The names, the photos, the flavors. I remembered the taste from the cones I'd bought before. I realized what I had eaten. I threw up on the floor. The sound was loud, too loud. The garage echoed like a cave. A chair scraped upstairs. Then footsteps. He'd heard me. I froze. Then I heard his voice call from the kitchen. It was slow, calm. "Who's there?" I didn't move. The sound of his shoes came closer. I panicked and looked around for a way out. The garage door was too heavy to lift quietly. The only other door was to the basement. I went for it. The stairs creaked under my weight. The smell got worse as I went down. Wet concrete, bleach, and everything else underneath. When I reached the bottom, I heard crying. There were people down there. 5 or 6, men mostly. One of them couldn't have been older than me. Their wrists were tied, some with rope, some with metal chains bolted into the wall. They were thin and pale. None of them screamed when they saw me. They just stared, like animals that had given up on noise. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. I couldn't untie anyone fast enough. I couldn't even find where the chains were locked. Before I could move, the door above me slammed. Heavy footsteps came down. The light bulb at the top of the stairs flickered as he came down. He was holding a knife and a phone. He didn't look angry, just focused. He went straight to one of the teenagers in chains. The kid was shaking, crying. Mr. Hale told him if he said where I was hiding, he'd let him go. An eye for an eye. The boy hesitated, then pointed right at me. He saw me immediately. I thought he would stab me. Instead, he smiled a little. He said my name. I didn't know how he knew it. Then he said my brother's name. My little brother. That froze me harder than the knife. He told me he was friends with my dad. Then he knew where we lived, what time my brother left for school. He said he didn't want to hurt me. No, too much trouble. And my father was his friend. Mr. Hale nodded like it was good behavior. Then he looked back at me and dropped the knife on the floor between us. He said I had one chance. I could walk out of there alive if I killed the boy who gave me up. If I refused, he'd go to my house and kill my brother that same night. I picked up the knife. My hands were shaking so bad it almost fell. In that moment I thought, I can use this knife against him. Like knowing what I was thinking, he stepped back and pulled a gun from his coat. He aimed it at me. The message was clear. I didn't want to do it. I told him I wouldn't. He said my brother's name again, and this time it wasn't a threat. It was a countdown. The boy on the ground begged me not to. I could barely hear anything. Everything was spinning. I just did it. It's been a year since then. I work the truck now. He made me do it. He said he recorded everything, and if I told the cops, he'd show them footage that made me look like a killer. He told me no one would believe me. He said if I stopped showing up, he'd release the video. When I hand cones to kids, I smile like nothing's wrong. I hear his voice in my head reminding me to keep the routine. I scoop, I charge, I wave. People think I'm just helping a busy man run his business. My father is proud of me. Sometimes I still taste the chocolate flavor in my mouth. It doesn't make me sick anymore. I don't even feel anything when I sell it. That scares me the most. Not the blood, not the bodies, but the part of me that's getting used to it.
It started as a joke between me and a coworker. We were talking about weird corners of the internet, the kind of places you're not supposed to look into. He mentioned a site that looked like a dating app, but hidden on the dark web, where people with, let's say, special interests meet. That night, I got home, opened Tor, and typed the address he gave me. I wasn't even looking for a date. I just wanted to see if something like that could exist. The site looked basic. A black background, white letters, no ads. No chat rooms, just profiles. The users didn't look like bots. They wrote things that felt too personal, too strange to be fake. I scrolled for a while until I saw one that made me stop. Her name was Vera Sheds. Her profile was blurry, like it was taken with an old webcam. The bio said, "Lover of transformation, collector of skins. Snakes are my teachers." I laughed at it, but something about the way she wrote got stuck in my head. There was something I definitely didn't expect with her. She was normal. I mean, yes, she was from the dark web. She had weird tastes, and she definitely had weird tastes. But besides that, she was really chill. She was obsessed with snakes. When I asked her about her snake thing, she said she admired how snakes renew themselves, how they shed their old layers to become something pure. I told her that sounded poetic. She replied, "It's not poetry, it's necessary." I didn't find that weird. She was just passionate about the things she liked. We talked for a few days. She sent me a photo so I can tell she was real. She had a way of talking that felt hypnotic. When she asked if I could come over, I hesitated. She was direct. "I want to meet you in person." I said yes, even though I shouldn't have. She sent me a message that only said, "Then I'll come tonight." The hours dragged. I cleaned up my apartment even though I didn't know why. I kept checking the window, the hallway, my phone. Around midnight, there was a knock. Just one. Slow. I opened the door halfway. She was standing there. Tall, maybe my height, wearing a long black coat even though it wasn't cold. Her hair was straight and dark, but her face, something about it didn't sit right. The skin on her cheeks looked tight, shiny in some parts, rough in others, like she'd had a bad burn or a bad surgery. Her lips didn't move much when she spoke. "You have nice skin." That was the first thing she said. I froze. She smiled, but it looked wrong, too wide. We sat in my living room. She didn't take off her coat. She looked around like she was studying the place, or maybe me. She kept her hands in her pockets. Her eyes followed every small movement I made. "Do you live here alone?" "Yeah." She nodded, satisfied. Then she leaned closer. I could smell something strange on her. Not perfume, not sweat. It was chemical, like latex or glue. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I like your neck. You have soft lines." I laughed nervously, trying to diffuse it. She didn't laugh back. She stared at me until I looked away. Every word she said after that felt heavier, like she was choosing each syllable carefully. "Tell me, do you ever think about what's under your skin?" "Not really." "You should. Most people ignore the most beautiful part of themselves, the layer they never get to see." Her tone changed. There was a strange calm in it. I tried to steer the conversation somewhere else, but she wasn't listening. She looked at my arms like a butcher deciding where to cut. When I said it was late and maybe she should go, she just smiled again. "You invited me in, That means I can stay until I finish. For a few seconds, we just sat there in silence. The TV was still on, showing some dumb reality show, the light flickering across her face. I saw it clearly then. The edges of her skin didn't line up perfectly. Around her jaw, there was a faint seam, almost invisible unless you looked hard, like a bad prosthetic glued too tight. My stomach tightened. I stood up. I think you should go. She didn't move. She tilted her head. Do you know what snakes do when they outgrow their skin? They split it open, piece by piece. Then she reached into her coat. I stepped back expecting a knife, but instead, she pulled out something smaller. A straight razor. The metal caught the light. She stood slow, her movements precise. Her face was blank, detached. I backed away toward the kitchen, trying to think of what to grab. My heart was racing so hard I could barely see. She followed, calm as ever, dragging the razor across her forearm. The skin peeled slightly, revealing another layer underneath, pink and damp. She smiled. It's not painful. It's beautiful. You just have to want it. When she lunged, I tripped over the chair. The razor slashed my shoulder. Not deep, but enough to make me scream. She leaned down, touched the blood with her finger, and stared at it like it was gold. Your color suits me. I ran for the hallway, clutching my shoulder. She followed without hurrying, her boots clicking softly on the floor. Every time I looked back, she was closer, still calm, still smiling. I reached the bathroom, slammed the door, and locked it. I pressed my hand against the wound. It burned. I could hear breathing on the other side. Then a soft knock. You shouldn't hide. I don't want to hurt you. I just want to wear you. The door rattled. She started whispering things I couldn't understand. Not English, not any language I knew. I backed away shaking, looking for anything to defend myself with. The only thing within reach was a pair of scissors. The door cracked. I heard the wood splintering. She pushed through the gap, her face half visible. The light caught it again, and this time I saw it clearly. Patches of different tones, scars, textures, none of it matched. Her left cheek looked like male skin, rougher. Around her eyes, the skin was smoother, younger. When the door burst open, I swung the scissors. They sank into her face. She screamed, not in pain, but in rage. She stumbled back, clutching her cheek, and I saw it tear open like a mask. A piece of skin hung loose, exposing raw flesh underneath. She turned away from me, pressing hard against the wound as if terrified I'd seen her. I didn't wait. I ran. The apartment door was still open from when she came in. I sprinted through it, bleeding, barefoot. I didn't look back until I was in the hallway. She was standing in the doorway, holding her face, shaking. Her voice was low, almost childlike. Don't look at me. Don't you dare look at me. She crouched down, covering her head with her arms, muttering to herself. I ran down the stairs and out into the street. It was empty. No cars, no people, just the sound of my own breathing. I didn't stop running until I reached the corner store. The clerk stared at me like I was crazy. I told him to call the police. When they went to my apartment, they found her in the exact place, crying like a maniac, refusing to move and begging the cops not to see her. I had to get stitches on my shoulder. The doctor said the cut was clean, like from a surgical blade. She knew what she was doing. It wasn't the first time. And even though she was arrested, she didn't confess any crime, and nothing could be linked to her. She was going to be in the jail, but not for long. I still feel down in my wounds. I will see her again. I work security, nights at a warehouse outside of Detroit. mostly dead hours. I check locks, walk the perimeter, drink bad coffee, and wait for the clock to crawl past dawn. Nobody bothers me out there. Just me, the silence, and my phone. I used to scroll through memes and junk videos until everything started to look the same. One night, a guy I shared a shift with told me about a stream he found on the deep web. Said it wasn't gore or fake stuff. Said it was real. I didn't believe him at first. He wouldn't even look at me when he talked about it. Just stared ahead and said, "You'll know when you see it." Out of boredom or stupidity, I downloaded a Tor browser and started poking around. Dead links, trash forums, and red room hoaxes. All garbage. I was about to close everything when I found a stream. No name, no description, just a code, BRL-197. The video showed a metal door in a concrete wall. Cracked, rusted, something leaking from underneath. The stream didn't buffer. It didn't glitch. It was too clean. And yet nothing happened. Just that door. I left the tab open, stared for 10 minutes, maybe more. I didn't see anything, but I felt like I had been seen. 2 nights later, I went back. Same stream, same camera. Only now, the door had a handprint on it. Red, wet. It hadn't been there before. I watched longer this time, focused. Nothing moved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing just outside the frame. Then the camera angle changed, just a little, lower, tilted up, like someone had picked it up and moved it by hand. Still no sound, no movements, but now the space behind the door looked darker, like the hallway had been swallowed by something. I stayed with the stream until the morning sun lit up the warehouse parking lot. No jump scares, no edits, no chat, just the feed. I told myself I was just watching a loop, that it was all part of a hoax, but the next night, the door was open. Inside, I saw a narrow hallway. The walls were stained and cracked. Every few feet, there was a hook screwed into the concrete, and on one of them hung a woman's blouse, torn straight down the back, blood smeared across the collar. There were no screams, no ambient music, just a faint dragging sound, as if someone was pulling something heavy, slow across cement. I turned the volume all the way up. That's all I heard. The feed changed every night, never drastically. The camera just pushing further down the hallway, inch by inch. On night 5, I saw a bucket filled with clothes. Scarves, sandals, hair ties. All women's, all stained. The same dragging sound kept looping, never getting closer, never fading. Then came the night when the hooks weren't empty anymore. The first time I saw one occupied. I stared so long I forgot to breathe. A body, limp, barefoot, tied at the ankles, swinging slightly like someone had just stepped back after hanging it. The skin was bloated, the face swollen beyond recognition. That was when the timestamp appeared. Bottom right, 4:12 a.m. / barely. I Googled it. A city in India. Seemed random until I found the name attached to it. Kuladip Gangravar, the butcher of Bareilly. 9 murders, women only. Strangled with their own clothes. Arrested last year. I clicked deeper. News reports, old forum threads, message boards that had been inactive for months. Everything about Gangravar pointed to a cold case solved. But that couldn't be right. The stream was live. The timestamp matched India's time zone. The clothes, the bodies, the environment. It was real. One of the deeper articles mentioned the butcher collected trophies. Lipstick, bindis, scraps of fabric. Police found them in his house, neatly sorted in boxes. The stream started showing them too. A shelf appeared on the left side of the hallway. Lipstick tubes lined up like bullets. I still remember the 4th one from the left. A deep red color, the cap chewed like someone bit into it. A week later, I saw the same lipstick stain on the lips of the next body that showed up on camera. She was still alive at first. Her hands twitched. Then they stopped. The dragging sound didn't loop anymore. It got louder, real, pacing. 3 nights later, I saw her face. A woman bound to a metal chair in what looked like a storage room. No windows, cement walls. Her wrists were tied with some kind of cloth. Her mouth gagged with a knotted scarf. The lighting was dim, but she was definitely alive. Her eyes were wide. She kept looking at something behind the camera. The sound of boots echoed, heavy, measured. The kind of steps someone takes when they're not in a rush. The woman started shaking. Her breathing grew faster. You could hear her trying not to cry through the gag. Then a hand entered the frame. It touched her shoulder, slow, possessive. The hand was scarred, the skin cracked, fingernails black with grime. Whoever it belonged to didn't speak, just circled her once out of view. The woman squirmed harder. He returned, holding something in his other hand. A piece of fabric twisted in a noose. He held it up, like showing it to the camera. The screen cut to static. The stream came back the next night. Same room, but now it was empty. The chair was still there, the restraints cut. The floor had fresh streaks, red, thick. There was a plastic bag propped up on the table. Inside was something that looked like a scalp. Long black hair, still tied back in a braid. The chair wasn't empty for long. The camera cut, then came back, and a new woman was tied down. This one screaming behind the gag. Screaming so hard, it sounded like her lungs were giving out. There was no one else in the frame, just her, and then the footsteps again. It hit me then. The camera wasn't stationary. It wasn't CCTV. It was handheld. Someone was holding it, watching. 3 days later, I got an email. I hadn't signed up for anything. It just appeared in my inbox. Subject, we saw you watching. No message, just a file. A still from the stream. Only now, the camera was facing a wall with my name on it. My full name, written in blood red paint, dripping fresh. I threw up. I tried wiping the email from my drive, deleted everything, burned the USB. But the file kept coming back. I'd deleted it, emptied the trash, and there it was again the next day. The file size kept changing. Then I got a second email. It had a short video clip. The butcher, visible now, no mask, held up a photo. It was my ID, my Michigan driver's license. He looked straight into the camera, no expression, no blink, just stared for 10 seconds. Then the screen went black. I stopped going to work, stopped answering calls. I bought a burner phone, packed a bag, and drove west without telling anyone. Every time I stopped at a gas station or a diner, I expected to see that face. I changed phones weekly, paid in cash, slept in my car. But it wasn't over. At a motel in New Mexico, I turned on the room TV and the HDMI lit up by itself. I switched to the stream. Same room, same angle. The camera was walking now, toward a door. Room number 206. That was my room. I didn't wait. I ran barefoot across the parking lot, past a truck stop, into the desert. Left everything behind. My wallet, my phone, my ID, all of it. I stayed off the grid after that night. Changed names. Never stayed anywhere more than a week. No screens, no phones. I used libraries to check maps, wrote down directions by hand. Every screen felt like a trap. Months passed. I almost believed it was over. But the fear doesn't fade. It just hides behind your routines. Then last week in a public library in Arizona, I walked past a kid watching YouTube. His screen glitched for a second. I glanced. Just a frame. Half a second. It was the chair. Same room, same lighting. The shelf in the back had a new item. A Michigan license plate. Scratched. Mine. I don't use real names anymore. I sleep in storage units, eat from vending machines. Keep to myself. You can't explain this to anyone without sounding insane. The butcher was caught, they say. He's locked away. But someone kept the stream going. Someone took over. Or maybe he was never really caught. You don't find the stream. It finds you. You click, you watch, you think you're safe, sitting behind your keyboard half a world away. Then the screen shifts. The camera moves. The door opens. And it's your name on the wall. This story is based on real events connected to Kuldeep Kumar Gangrawar, known as the Butcher of Bareilly, a serial killer from Uttar Pradesh, India. Between 2023 and 2024, Gangrawar targeted women between the ages of 45 and 65, luring them into isolated sugarcane fields before strangling them with their own clothes. He left no sexual evidence, but investigators noted consistent injuries on the victim's thighs and chins, hinting at a disturbing intent. Gangrawar often took trophies from the women: lipstick, bindis, torn scarves, storing them like mementos. His arrest in mid-2024 brought an end to a 14-month killing spree that haunted Bareilly's rural districts. Although he was captured, several elements of the case remain unclear. The methodical approach, lack of forensic trails, and Gangrawar's chilling confession led some to believe he was operating under the radar long before his first confirmed kill. Reports from villagers and unofficial forums hinted at deeper networks or accomplices, which authorities never confirmed. This fictional story reimagines what could happen if a monster like him adapted to the digital age, using the shadows of the deep web to continue his rituals, hidden in plain sight. I purchased a laptop on the dark web. I never should have bought that laptop. It turned my life completely upside down. It all started on a late-night browsing spree, the kind that often lead me down the rabbit holes of obscure dark websites offering all kinds of tantalizing offers. You could find anything imaginable there, from legal to the illegal and everything in between. That's when I found it. A listing that seemed innocent enough, buried among a jumble of more questionable items. Old laptop, perfect for refurbishing. Minimal wear and tear in good working condition, the ad read. I am a tech enthusiast who is always looking for new projects, and this one was too good to pass up. The only reservation I had was the seller's lack of reviews, and those that existed were vague, making it hard to tell if the product was legit. But the price was unbeatable, and I figured it was worth the risk. As I clicked buy now, a sense of unease settled in my stomach, but I brushed it off. I needed a distraction, and the laptop seemed like the perfect project. When the laptop finally arrived, it looked a little worn, but had a certain retro charm to it. I wiped it down, plugged it in, and powered it up. The screen flickered to life, revealing a handful of files. Most were harmless, old documents, music files, and applications, but one stood out. Do not open. It read in bold red lettering. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the mouse. Curiosity gnawed at me. It had to be a joke left by the previous owner. I was a seasoned hacker. I could, of course, handle a simple file. Taking a deep breath, I clicked. Immediately, the screen filled with static. The sound was sharp, cutting through the silence and sending a chill down my spine. I wanted to close the laptop, but I continued to watch, mesmerized. The video appeared, grainy and dark. A strange-looking figure stood before a flickering candle, chanting in a language I couldn't understand. His voice was low and haunting. Suddenly, he turned to the camera, revealing his hollow eyes that seemed to stare straight through me. The video then abruptly cuts off, leaving only an eerie silence. I closed the laptop, a little taken aback but not totally shaken. It's just a video, I whispered to myself. Nothing more. But I had no idea that the real disturbances were only about to begin in my life. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of notifications. My social media accounts were filled with strange messages, and people I hadn't spoken to in years were frantically emailing, calling, and texting me. I was overwhelmed, trying to make sense of all of it. Then an old school friend called, his voice sounding shaky. He asked if I was okay, saying he'd received an email with a video of me trying to hang myself. I froze in shock. "I'm sending it now," he said. The email arrived, and my heart raced as I clicked the video. It was a grainy recording of me in my living room, standing beneath a noose. I watched in horror as I positioned myself to go through with it. I had no memory of this. I had never done anything like this. How could this even happen? I asked myself. Just then, the doorbell rang, followed by loud banging. My stomach churned. Was it the police? Had someone reported the video? How am I going to explain any of this to them? Hesitant, I opened the door, bracing myself for a tough conversation with the police. But instead of the authorities, it was my girlfriend, Stella. Her mascara was smeared all over her face from crying, but her expression was nothing but pure fury. Without a word, she stormed in, shoving me back onto the couch. Before I could react, she kicked off her shoe and started hitting me with it. Hard, relentless blows as I tried to shield myself. "Stella, wait! I can explain!" I pleaded. "That video was fake. I wasn't trying to do anything." She paused, her chest heaving with anger, then pulled out her phone. "Explain this then," she spat, thrusting the screen in front of me. It was another video, this time of me sitting on a beach with a woman who wasn't Stella. The two of us were laughing and flirting while she sat on my lap. Tears streamed down Stella's face. "Are you saying this is fake too?" she asked, her voice cracking. I stared at the screen, dumbfounded. I didn't recognize the woman in the video, nor have I ever been to the beach as well. None of it made sense, but before I could even form a response, Stella threw her shoe at me one last time and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I was left sitting there, reeling from the sheer impossibility of it all. Then my phone rang again. This time, it was my parents. They said they'd received a news clip showing me in jail after a drunk driving accident. A news clip? Of me in jail? How could that even be possible? I asked myself again as I stood in my own living room, completely bewildered. My head spun as I spent the next few hours trying to calm down friends and family, assuring them I was fine and that it was all some prank. But was it really a prank? I reluctantly glanced at the laptop as a wave of dread washed over me, my heart pounding in my chest as I slowly approached it and opened it again. The screen flickered to life. This time, all of the files were gone except for two. The original Do Not Open file and a new one labeled Victims. A list appeared that was long and chilling. I scrolled down each entry, accompanied by photos and usernames from the dark web. People who were probably no longer alive. My blood ran cold when I saw my name. I was number 178, the most recent victim. My status was being shown as in progress. As I clicked on my folder, a photo of me appeared, along with details only someone who had been watching me would know. Some of the other usernames on the list were familiar too. People I'd seen online, on the dark web, in forums I frequent. I often wondered where they suddenly vanished. Now I knew why, and I realized I might be next. Panic surged through me. I slammed the laptop shut, grabbed it, and raced out the door. I drove for hours until I found a secluded spot near a dumpster. I tossed the laptop out and drove over it several times to make sure it was destroyed. For the first time in days, I felt some relief. But it didn't last long. When I returned home, my blood froze. The laptop was sitting on my desk as if it had never left. A chill crept down my spine as I stood there staring in horror. Paranoia consumed me. Right then, I knew I had a huge problem on my hands and had to find a solution for it, no matter what. So I started looking at online forums dedicated to paranormal activities and digital hauntings. Maybe, just maybe, someone else had encountered a similar experience. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing furiously, desperate for answers. As I scrolled through hundreds of posts, I found one that caught my eye. It was headlined, "The Cursed Laptop." The poster detailed a story eerily similar to mine. After purchasing an old laptop from the dark web, he began receiving ominous messages and videos that terrorized the user. His advice was simple but chilling. Confront it. Do a cleansing ritual. So I researched further on the dark web, uncovering an array of rituals involving salt, candles, and incantation. I gathered the supplies, feeling both foolish and desperate at the same time. As night fell, I prepared the ritual in my dimly lit apartment, following all the instructions to the letter. I lit a row of candles on either side of the room and drew a circle on the middle of the floor using salt. Once I stood inside the circle, I started with the incantation. Spirits of the digital realm, I call upon you to reveal yourself, I said, my voice slightly trembling. I seek an end to this torment. Nothing happened at first, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But then, the laptop flickered violently. The screen flashed, and the ominous file reappeared, more vivid than before. The strange figure was looking at me intently through the laptop as if he was trying to get a measure of me. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Even the light from the candles was being blocked from illuminating the room by some unseen powerful force. And then slowly, the candles started to spread a little bit of light around the room, casting a creepy-looking silhouette by my side. Right then, I felt a cold and putrid breath against my neck, and a voice whispered in my ear, "You've invited me in, Anthony." I could feel his presence just behind the salt circle, and I realized he couldn't get closer. This was the same figure that appeared on the video first when I opened the laptop. But in real, he looked a lot more terrifying. He carefully stood at the edge of my vision, his dark silhouette blurring the boundaries of reality. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice cracking. The figure stepped closer, its face a distorted visage of rage. "You opened the door, and now you must pay the price." Terror clawed at me inside, but I forced myself to stand my ground. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to refurbish the laptop." "It's too late for remorse," he hissed, a chilling echo of my own fear. In that moment, I remembered the ritual. I needed to confront this entity, to assert my will. "I reject you. I will not be your victim. Spirits of the digital realm, I command you to leave," I shouted at the top of my lungs. The temperature dropped sharply, and the shadows lengthened. I felt a pull, a tug of war between my will and the spirit's malevolent force as everything started to swirl around me. The figure roared in anger, while the screen flickered wildly as it struggled against my command. Suddenly, my room was plunged into complete darkness, and the power finally returned a few seconds later. When my gaze shifted towards the table, I realized the laptop was gone. It had disappeared. Finally, out of my life for good. Oh, thank God and the Holy Spirits. After that day, I changed all of my electronic devices. Yes, I replaced every one of them. I even deleted my email and other online accounts and opened completely new ones. I didn't want to leave anything to chance. In fact, it has been over 3 months since I visited the dark web, and I don't plan to visit anytime soon. Then I also managed to get back with my girlfriend, Stella. Somehow, I was able to convince her of my innocence. So one day, while we were on vacation and having a good time, a message suddenly appeared on my phone. Attached was a single folder. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The folder's name flashed at me in bold red lettering. "Do not open."
I was the night shift doctor, alone in the north wing. The others had gone home hours ago. No patients here, just the break room, a few dark hallways, and my office. It was supposed to be a quiet night. I had my coffee, my laptop, and a stack of files. The heater rattled softly, the old vending machine hummed in the corner, and the clock ticked too loud. I didn't realize how much I hated the silence until the power cut out. The lights snapped off without warning. Not the whole hospital, just this wing. Everything went dark. The vending machine stopped, the heater died, and the glow from my laptop disappeared. For a second, I sat frozen, staring into the blackness, trying to understand if it was a normal outage. My gut twisted. Something felt wrong. I pulled out my phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi. My fingers moved fast, unlocking the door and stepping into the hallway. But the moment I did, I regretted it. It was like stepping into a void. The break room door was locked, windows sealed shut. I was on the second floor. No escape. I told myself to stay calm, but my hands were already shaking. I paced back to my office, checking my phone again and again. Still no signal. I sat down, trying to think, but then I heard it. Footsteps. Not one or two, but several, echoing down the black hall. My breath caught. My first thought was security, but they weren't calling out, weren't using flashlights, just walking, hunting. I crept to the door, peeking through the cracked frame. 3 figures moved smoothly past, dressed in black, not hesitating. They weren't lost. They weren't checking for people. They were looking for me. My chest tightened and I backed away, locking the door. My brain raced, trying to figure out who they were. Cops? No. Thieves? Maybe. But why here? A bang down the hall made me jump. They were breaking into rooms one by one. I slid under my desk, gripping the edge, squeezing my eyes shut for a second. The doorknob rattled. My pulse roared in my ears. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't prepared to survive this kind of night. A sharp kick hit the door, shaking the frame. I saw the outline of one man through the frosted glass. He wasn't yelling, wasn't demanding I open up. He was patient, cold. He pulled something from his pocket, worked the lock. My fists clenched as I slid under the desk, heart thudding so loud I was sure they could hear it. The lock clicked. The door creaked open, and Boots stepped in. Heavy, slow, deliberate. He kicked a chair, checked behind a cabinet, breathing steady. I bit my lip hard, eyes locked on the Boots moving closer. He crouched down, eyes meeting mine under the desk. My body jolted into action, shoving hard against the desk, sending him stumbling back as I bolted from the room. I sprinted down the hall, legs burning, lungs on fire. I could hear their feet pounding behind me, fast, determined. Every door I passed was locked, every turn felt like a trap. My mind screamed at me to keep going, even as panic closed in like a fist around my throat. I had no plan, just the raw, blind urge to survive. I tore around a corner, but one of them was already there, blocking the way. I slammed into him, struggling, shoving, trying to break free. His fist slammed into my ribs, pain exploded through my side. I staggered, pushed past him, stumbling into the next hallway. Behind me, angry voices barked orders, feet pounded faster. My chest heaved. I was running out of time. The break room loomed ahead again, still locked. I spun, heart hammering, back pressing against the wall. One of the men approached slowly, calmly, pulling a syringe from his pocket, the needle glinting in the faint light. My breath came in ragged gasps as I shook my head, trying to back away, but the wall pressed cold against my spine.
Easy, Doc. You don't want to make this harder.
I clenched my fists, then lunged, slapping the syringe from his hand. He cursed, grabbing for me, but I ducked under his arm, bolting back down the hall. My legs screamed, feet slipping on the floor as I pushed myself harder, lungs straining, every nerve screaming, but I wasn't fast enough. Another man kicked at my legs, sending me sprawling, head cracking against the cold tile. Pain bloomed, sharp and hot, as hands yanked me back. One pinned me down, another jammed the syringe into my arm. Cold liquid burned under my skin. Panic roared in my chest, but I swung an elbow back, catching one in the face. A sharp grunt, a curse, and I shoved up, breaking free. I stumbled, dizzy, vision swimming. My legs felt like lead. I clawed at the walls, forcing myself toward the only place I knew, my office. They shouted behind me, boots slamming hard on the floor. My chest heaved, vision narrowing, but I refused to stop. I crashed into my office, slamming the door behind me. My hands fumbled at the window latch, breath ragged, heart racing. I could hear them outside, shouting, kicking at the door. My fingers slipped, vision blurring, but I forced the latch open, shoving the window wide. Cold air rushed in, biting my face, jolting me slightly awake. I climbed up, body swaying. My limbs felt heavy, but adrenaline shoved me forward. The door burst open behind me. A man lunging forward, grabbing my ankle, yanking me hard. I kicked wildly, barely keeping hold on the frame. His grip tightened, and I knew I had seconds. Summoning everything left in me, I twisted violently, tearing free, and hurled myself out the window. The cold night air blasted me as the ground rushed up. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs, pain exploding through my side. I lay in the snow, gasping, blinking up at the dark sky. Shapes loomed above me, white coats, shouting voices. Then everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, machines beeping softly, light stabbing into my eyes. A colleague sat by my side, face drawn with worry. He told me they found something strange in my system, something they couldn't identify. He stayed the night, said I was lucky to be alive. Later, the police came, asking questions, scribbling in their notepads. I told them about the 3 men, about the syringe, and about the chase. They promised to track him down, to keep me safe. I smiled, thanked them, told them how grateful I was it was all over. The hospital staff, the police, even my colleagues sitting by my bed, they saw me as a victim, a lucky survivor. They thought I was clean, innocent, just another doctor caught in something bigger than himself. They were so wrong. You see, I knew about those 3 men. Those were white-hat hackers. They were trying to shut down my operation. They knew what I do. They knew who I am. They know I was about to leave, and they ruined their only chance to get me. I've been running this business for years. Sometimes I told them to take terminal patients, other times healthy ones without families. Those people are from a red room. I feed the deep web what it craves. Real suffering, real blood, real death. And the people paying? They pay millions to watch. And now I've been doing this enough time to become filthy rich. Did you really think you were watching a story about survival? About a good man under attack? Were you rooting for me? That's adorable. Now I have enough money to disappear. No one will find me. Not the police, not the hackers, no one. You can take this story as my confession, or you can also take it as the words of a criminal celebrating that he is unpunished. I don't care what you think. You only need to know that I won. Good night.
7 years ago, we downloaded something we shouldn't have. It was supposed to be a messed up game from the deep web, nothing more. I wasn't looking for trouble, just something creepy to waste time on with my friend Kyle. We were both into weird stuff, but this was different. It didn't want to scare you, it wanted to get inside your head and stay there. Kyle's the one who found it. Some forum with threads buried under fake links and broken images. Most people said the game didn't exist, or that anyone who played it ended up different. That was enough for him. He dug for weeks, and one night, he said he had it. No title screen, no menu, just a black file named The Pale Door. We launched it in his basement. Lights off, headphones in. It looked like a broken walking simulator. Narrow hallways, looping corridors, and dirty textures. No enemies, no puzzles, just the sound of feet echoing off concrete, and that noise. Static layered over something else, something low, like whispering underwater. We didn't say anything while we played, we just stared. When we finished the first session, Kyle smiled. I remembered he said, "It was just starting to get good." The next day we found another file in the game folder. We didn't download it, I'm sure of that. It was named PD_message.exe. That night, we loaded it up, and that's when things started to get worse. The screen went black for almost a full minute. Then one line appeared. Only one leaves. We thought it was a joke. Kyle laughed, said it was part of the ARG. Then the screen shifted, showing the same corridor but with 4 doors. He clicked the first one. Everything warped. The floor stretched, textures peeled away, then a loud, distorted scream shot through the speakers. It didn't sound like part of the game. The screaming didn't stop when we closed the laptop. It didn't even stop when we unplugged the headphones. It was in the basement with us. Loud, sharp, coming from the corner of the room like someone was stuck there, shrieking from inside the wall. Kyle dropped the laptop and froze. I remember the way he looked at me, like he was trying to figure something out. Then he said it. It knows I picked you. I didn't go back until 2 days later. Kyle wasn't answering texts. His mom said he was sick. Wouldn't come out of his room. I climbed in through the basement window. The air inside was thick, humid. The lights were off and the screen of his laptop was still glowing, stuck on the same hallway with a symbol drawn above one of the doors. It looked like a triangle made of 3 blinking eyes. I tried to shut it off, but the keys didn't respond. The mouse moved on its own. It hovered over the 3rd door, clicked, and the hallway on screen opened into a long, dark tunnel. On the walls, images flickered. Split-second photos of people. Real people. Some of them were missing limbs. Some were just faces, burned or smashed. I stepped back. Then the laptop speakers cut out, and I started hearing something else. It wasn't coming from the screen anymore, it was upstairs. A voice repeating something in a loop. It was Kyle. His voice was low, like he was trying to keep someone calm, but the words didn't make sense. I climbed up to his room and found the door locked. I banged on it until it opened on its own. Kyle was sitting on the floor with his back to the wall, eyes wide open, muttering the same sentence again and again. He picked wrong. He picked wrong. He picked wrong. He had drawn that triangle symbol all over the walls, in pencil, marker, and even what looked like blood. The room stank like piss and something metallic. When I asked him what was going on, he looked at me for half a second. I told it to take me instead. I stayed there that night because I didn't know what else to do. Kyle wouldn't sleep, wouldn't eat. He just sat in the corner whispering things to himself. Around midnight, the laptop powered on again by itself. No one touched it. The screen lit up with that corridor, but now the walls were covered in the word "forgotten" over and over. I tried to shut it off again. No luck. It played something different this time. A video. Black and white, low quality, a room like Kyle's, a boy maybe 10 years old, screaming while something moved just outside the camera frame. The boy looked at the screen like he could see us. He mouthed one word. Help. And then we heard it. A knock, not at the door, at the basement entrance. 3 times. Then silence. Kyle curled into a ball. He said nothing, didn't even breathe for a few seconds. Then he started sobbing. The knock came again, louder. Then a second knock followed by something dragging across the door, slow and heavy. I wanted to run. I didn't. I grabbed Kyle's arm and told him we had to leave. But he wouldn't move. His eyes were locked on the screen. A new message had appeared. He stays, you go. I snapped the laptop shut. The doorknob turned on its own. It didn't open, just turned back and forth like someone was testing it. Kyle started screaming. Not words, just raw screaming like an animal. His nose bled, his gums bled, and then he slammed his head into the wall. Once, twice. The door finally opened, but nothing came in. The hallway light flickered, then the shadows moved. This wasn't like a movie. There was no clear shape. It wasn't a monster. It was a presence, like something watching you from every direction at once, pressing into your skin. Kyle stood up. For the first time in hours, he moved, walked right up to the doorway. I tried to grab him. He looked over his shoulder and said something I'll never forget. Don't follow me. It already chose. He stepped out into the hallway. The door slammed shut. All the lights went out at once. I don't remember running, I just remember the cold, the sound of things scratching at the inside of the walls as I crawled out of the basement window. I hit the ground hard and didn't stop running until I reached my car. I drove straight to the police. I told them Kyle was hurt. I told them everything except the game. They searched the house, the basement was clean, the laptop was gone. So was Kyle. No blood, no symbols. His mom said she never saw him come back. They think he ran away. I don't know where Kyle is. To be honest, I'm not sure if I want to know.
The first thing people should understand is that this trip didn't start with hope. It started because staying home with him had become unbearable. We were already fighting long before the car was packed, long before the road stretched in front of us, and long before I convinced myself that a few days away might calm him down. He drove the entire time, gripping the steering wheel like it belonged to him and him alone, deciding when we stopped, what we ate, and when we spoke. Every attempt at conversation ended with him correcting me, mocking me, or turning my words against me, so I learned to stay quiet and stare out the window. We stopped in a restaurant on the side of the road. The sign was old, the paint was cracked, and there were no other cars parked nearby. It didn't look closed, but it didn't look open either. It looked like time had stopped there and never bothered to come back. Inside, everything felt outdated and silent. One woman came out from the back, older, calm, and strangely attentive. She gave us menus and disappeared again. I remember thinking that if something went wrong in that place, there would be no one around to hear us. We sat there without talking, and the silence was sharp, not calm. He kept checking his phone, then watching me like he was waiting for a mistake. I focused on the menu even though I wasn't hungry, because looking at him felt dangerous. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't even open the message right away, but when I did, I smiled without thinking. It was a coworker asking if I could come to his birthday the following week. A normal message, nothing hidden, nothing inappropriate. That small smile was enough. His face changed instantly, his voice getting louder as he demanded to know who had written to me. When I told him it was someone from work, his tone turned ugly, sharp and fast. He accused me of talking to other men, of embarrassing him, of cheating on him openly. He started shouting things that made people turn their heads, saying I was worthless, that I gave him nothing after everything he had done for me, that I didn't even deserve to be alive. He said all of this without lowering his voice, without shame, and with a look that told me he would have gone further if we were alone. He grabbed my phone and threw it into the trash like it was nothing. He leaned close and told me that during this trip, I wouldn't talk to anyone, and when we got home, we would have a serious conversation. I stood up shaking, walking toward the bathroom, and heard him yelling behind me to stop pretending and calling me a disgusting little rat. The hallway to the bathroom felt longer than it should have, and every step made me expect him to follow me, to grab me, or to drag me back to the table. Inside, I locked the door and leaned over the sink, trying to breathe without making noise. The tension built slowly because silence with him had never meant safety. I waited, listening for footsteps, for shouting, for the door handle to move, knowing from experience that privacy was something that he didn't respect. When the door finally opened, it wasn't him. It was the woman from the restaurant. She closed the door carefully and stood next to me without asking questions, as if she already knew exactly what was happening. She spoke calmly and told me about her past, about a man who hit her, humiliated her, and treated her like a servant. She explained how her life had revolved around pleasing him, feeding him, and staying quiet until she realized she was disappearing. She told me she left, that she built this place, and that no one controlled her anymore. I listened while my face burned with shame, because every word felt too familiar. I told her thank you, but I said there was nothing I could do, that this was just how things were for me. She looked at me seriously and said there was something to do, and that she could help. When she told me to follow her into the kitchen, my heart started racing. The kitchen was clean, quiet, and smelled like old oil and soap. She opened a cabinet and took out a small bottle with cloudy liquid, telling me this was the first ingredient to starting a new life, and that it was meant for rats like him. I told her I didn't understand and that I was scared. She leaned closer and told me I didn't need to understand everything, only that she would handle what came next, that she would take responsibility, and that my only job would be to leave and never come back. The tension pressed on me as I stood there, watching her hold the bottle because every part of me knew how dangerous this was. But another part of me remembered every time he told me I was nothing, every time he hurt me, and then blamed me for it. She poured the liquid into his plate slowly without rushing, mixing it carefully into the food. Her hands didn't shake, and her face didn't change. She told me it was done and that I should go back to the table and wait. Walking back felt unreal. He immediately complained about how long I had taken and asked what I was doing in there. I told him I didn't feel well, and he ignored me like my words didn't matter. The food arrived quickly, and he complained again, criticizing the place and the service. The woman told us to enjoy our meal, her voice steady and neutral. I couldn't eat. I watched him closely as he started eating, every moment making my chest tighten. He kept talking, kept insulting me for being quiet, accusing me of trying to make him look bad. Then his voice cut off mid-sentence. His fork slipped from his hand, his body leaned sideways, and he collapsed onto the floor, hitting it hard and staying completely still. I stayed frozen in my chair, staring at him, while the woman calmly looked at me and pointed toward the door. I stood up and walked out, leaving everything behind. Outside, the road was empty, and the silence felt unreal. I walked without knowing where I was going, constantly expecting to hear someone shouting my name or running after me. The tension didn't fade. Every sound made me turn around. My body felt light and heavy at the same time, and my thoughts wouldn't slow down. I reached a gas station far down the road and asked to use a phone. I told them my boyfriend collapsed at a restaurant and that I didn't know what happened. My voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. Later, people asked questions. I told them we argued often and that he scared me. I said I left because I didn't feel safe. They said the cause was poisoning, but when they returned to the restaurant, it was closed and empty, like no one had been there in years. The fear stayed with me long after everything ended. Interviews, nights alone, and sudden noises kept me on edge, waiting for consequences that never came. No charges followed, no accusations were made, and no one could explain where the woman or the restaurant had gone. They said there wasn't enough evidence to blame anyone. I moved away, changed jobs, and stopped answering unfamiliar numbers. Even now, raised voices make my body tense automatically. People like to believe escape is loud and heroic, but sometimes it happens quietly and it leaves confusion behind. I don't feel strong or in control. I feel like someone who survived because another person chose to intervene. Some nights, I still wonder how many other rats were served at that table before me.
First time I realized something was wrong with Lisa, I should have left immediately. We had known each other since high school, grown up together. For many years, being with her felt inevitable, like our lives were tied together by default rather than choice. Things started to fall apart when our lives stopped moving in the same direction. I started feeling emotionally closer to someone at work, and that scared me enough to admit the truth to myself. I was no longer in love with Lisa. When I told her I wanted to separate, I expected pain, anger, maybe resentment. What I didn't expect was the way she reacted. Lisa refused to accept the breakup, and her reaction went far beyond sadness. She cried for hours, then screamed, then collapsed into long periods where she barely spoke or moved. She stopped eating regularly and barely slept. I started checking on her out of guilt rather than love. I told myself I was being kind, even though I knew staying close only confused things more. About a week later, she told me she felt physically unwell and had gone to the doctor on her own. When she came back, she sat across from me and said she was pregnant, already a few months along. She said this explained everything and that we had no choice but to stay together. I was stunned, and my first reaction was disbelief mixed with panic. But I didn't accuse her of lying. She cried and said she needed me, that the baby needed us. Against my better judgment, I agreed to try again. We reconciled quickly, moved back into routine, and I even proposed. It felt like the responsible thing to do. Lisa became calmer, focused on the pregnancy, and I threw myself into work to avoid thinking too much. As the weeks passed, small things began to feel off. Lisa always went to medical appointments alone or with relatives, saying it was a private experience and that pregnancy brought up things she wasn't ready to share. She also told me not to look at her stomach because it caused her anxiety, and she asked me to respect that boundary. I did, even though it felt strange. Her belly did grow, and that was enough to quiet my concerns. I told myself I was overthinking it. In the following weeks, there was a lot of tension between us. She was very stressed about the pregnancy until she joined a charity group that rescued stray dogs, which surprised me because she never liked animals before. She talked about it with intense enthusiasm, saying it gave her purpose and helped her focus on the future. I felt relieved, even proud, because it looked like she was finding balance again. That's where she met Sarah, another pregnant woman who was due around the same time. Lisa talked about her nonstop, and soon Sarah started visiting our apartment. They sat for hours discussing pregnancy, parenting, and future plans. They always talked about how our children would grow up together and be great friends. I met Sarah's husband, and we started having dinner together. I hadn't felt that hopeful in years, and that made me blind. We'd never been so happy, even as a couple. Everything was fantastic, until the day Lisa gave birth. One morning, a stranger called me, telling me that Lisa had been found on the street, holding a newborn baby. When I arrived, there were people gathered around her, whispering and staring. Lisa was sitting on the pavement with the baby pressed against her chest, both of them covered in blood. Her clothes were soaked, her hands were shaking, and her face looked pale and distant, like she wasn't fully there. She kept repeating that the baby was fine, and that everything was okay, even though nothing about the scene looked okay at all. I was angry, confused, and terrified all at once, asking why no one had helped her and how this could have happened without anyone calling me. Someone had already called an ambulance, and when the paramedics arrived, they tried to take the baby to check him. Lisa reacted immediately, pulling the baby closer and screaming that no one was allowed to touch him. She refused to stand up, refused to answer questions, and kept insisting that they didn't need a hospital. Watching her fight them felt unreal, like I was looking at someone I didn't fully recognize anymore. The paramedics had to force her onto the stretcher, and I followed the ambulance in my car, my thoughts spinning out of control. I kept telling myself that births could go wrong, that shock did strange things to people. But deep down, I knew this behavior wasn't normal. At the hospital, everything moved fast, but not in a reassuring way. Doctors separated Lisa from the baby despite her protests, and security had to intervene again because she refused to calm down. A doctor finally pulled me aside and spoke carefully, choosing words that already sounded wrong before I fully understood them. He said Lisa showed no physical signs of pregnancy or childbirth, no signs of labor, no signs of recovery, nothing that matched her story. I argued, raised my voice, insisted there had to be a mistake, but the doctor didn't waver. Not long after that, police officers arrived and asked to speak with me. They asked about Sarah, and the moment they said her name, my stomach dropped. One of them told me that Sarah had been found dead in her home earlier that day. She had been murdered. Her abdomen had been cut open, and her baby was gone. They told me that Lisa was the last person to see Sarah alive, that phone records and messages confirmed it. They told me the baby Lisa brought in matched Sarah's pregnancy timeline, not Lisa's. I felt dizzy, like the floor was tilting under my feet. The investigation moved quickly, and there was no room left for denial. Medical tests confirmed that Lisa had never been pregnant at all. The growing belly, the appointments, the symptoms, all of it had been fabricated. The baby wasn't ours. He was Sarah's. Police explained how Lisa had planned everything in advance. The fake pregnancy to keep me from leaving, the charity group to meet vulnerable women, the careful choice of Sarah because they were supposed to be due at the same time. Every step had been calculated, patient, and deliberate. When I was finally allowed to see Lisa, it was through a glass partition at the police station. She looked exhausted, but calm, and when she spoke, she didn't sound desperate. She said she had done what she had to do, and that this was the only way we could have a family. Hearing her say that made my chest tighten in a way I can't properly explain. The baby was returned to Sarah's family, and I never tried to see him again. Court hearings followed, and I attended them all, listening as the crime was described in full detail. Each time it felt like the air was being pushed out of my lungs, but I stayed silent because there was nothing left to say. Lisa was sentenced to death. I didn't feel relief or justice. I didn't feel like anything had been resolved. It felt like the ending to a story I never agreed to be a part of. I think constantly about the signs I ignored and the moments I explained away because facing the truth would have been uncomfortable. I trusted someone completely, and that trust was used to destroy another family. Lisa Montgomery was an American woman convicted of murdering Bobby Jo Stinnett in 2004 by strangling her and cutting her abdomen open to steal her unborn baby. Montgomery had pretended to be pregnant for months and used that lie to gain Stinnett's trust before attacking her in her home. The baby survived and was returned to the family, while Montgomery was arrested the same day and later in 2021 sentenced to death, becoming the first woman executed by the U.S. federal government in nearly 70 years.
This is the story of the most terrifying first date I ever had, which could have ended my life. Back then, I was 19, and I was pretty much in love with a guy. I had known Daniel from the neighborhood for a long time. As we grew older, we became friends, but the chemistry between us was always there. When he finally asked me out on a real date, I felt so happy and nervous at the same time. I took extra time getting ready, wanting everything to be perfect. In my mind, this was the beginning of something great. We went to dinner and it was so romantic. The candles on the table, the quiet music, low lights. We had an amazing time till midnight. When we walked outside afterward, neither of us wanted to say goodbye. That was when he asked if I wanted to do something a little crazy together. I said yes because I was young, curious, and convinced that nothing truly bad could happen to me. He suggested going to Provo Canyon for a walk. He said he liked walking there because it helped him relax, and he talked about how clear the stars looked away from the city lights. His tone was calm, like it was something he had done many times before. We drove there together, talking the whole way, still laughing, still feeling close. When we parked on the side of the road, the darkness felt deeper than I expected, but I did not want to ruin the mood or look scared over nothing. The path was narrow and uneven, and the trees blocked almost all the light. I remember thinking that if something happened, no one would hear us, but I forced that thought away. We joked about how dumb the idea was, walking into the woods on a first date, but the jokes slowly faded as the darkness grew thicker. We kept going anyway, We both wanted the night to feel special. The deeper we went, the quieter it became, and our conversation slowed until it stopped completely. I noticed that we were both listening more than talking, paying attention to every small sound around us. That was when I realized we were much farther in than I had planned, and the road felt uncomfortably distant behind us. We did not say it out loud, but both of us started walking faster at the same time, as if we shared the same thought without admitting it. The silence took over everything. Then we heard a noise behind us, sharp and sudden, like a branch snapping under weight. It did not sound random, and it did not sound far away. Daniel turned his head first, then I did the same, but the darkness hid everything beyond a few feet. We kept moving, faster now, pretending it was nothing, pretending this was still under control. Another sound followed, heavier than the first, and this time it felt closer, like whatever made it was following our path. Daniel stepped to the side, and his foot slid on something soft. He stopped suddenly, annoyed at first, then confused. He bent down, thinking it was mud or a dead animal, and that was when his entire body stiffened. His reaction scared me more than anything else. His face lost all color, his mouth opened, and his eyes stayed locked on the ground. When he finally spoke my name, his voice broke, and I knew something was very wrong. I looked down where he was staring, and my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. A woman's body lay twisted on the ground, damaged in ways I did not want to fully process. Parts of her were missing. I screamed desperately. Before running away, I felt something else, something worse than fear, the clear sense that we were not alone anymore. I lifted my head and scanned the trees. That was when I saw him. A man stood partially hidden among the bushes, not close enough to see clearly, but close enough that I knew he was watching us. He did not move at first. He was measuring us. The man took a slow step forward, and that single movement was enough to break whatever control we had left. We ran as fast as we could. Behind us, footsteps followed, fast and heavy, crashing through branches without hesitation. I could hear him gaining on us, and the sound made my chest tighten in panic. I did not dare look back, because I knew that if I saw him closer, I might freeze, and stopping even for a second felt like a death sentence. When we finally broke through the trees and reached the road, we quickly got into Daniel's car. We drove away as fast as we could, leaving the canyon behind. But the fear stayed with us the entire drive. We barely spoke on the way to the police station. Every sound made us flinch, and Daniel kept checking the mirrors, convinced we were being followed. I sat stiff in my seat, replaying the image of the body over and over, unable to push it away. At the station, we told everything exactly as it happened. The officers listened, took notes, and went out to the canyon with flashlights and patrol cars. We waited, holding on to each other, trying to stay calm. When they came back, their faces told the story before they spoke. They found nothing. No body, no blood, no signs of anything unusual. They asked careful questions, suggesting stress or imagination without accusing us directly. I felt frustrated and scared because I knew what I saw, and the fact that it was gone made it worse, not better. Over time, the incident became something we talked about less and less, and eventually, neither of us wanted to relive it constantly. Daniel and I are still together to this day. Years later, we were sitting together watching a crime program, barely paying attention when the tone of the interview changed. The man on screen spoke calmly, methodically recounting how he had murdered dozens of women, until the journalist asked him if he had ever been on the verge of being discovered before being arrested. When he mentioned Provo Canyon, both of us went still. The room felt suddenly very quiet, and every word demanded our attention. He described killing a woman and leaving her in the woods. He talked about hiding when he heard people coming, about watching a young couple walk into the scene, about realizing he would have to kill them too. He explained how they escaped, how lucky he was, and how he managed to clean everything and leave no evidence behind. He spoke about it like it was a clever move. I felt sick as the realization settled in, slow and heavy. This man was talking about us, about that night, about how close we came to dying. When the interviewer said his name, Ted Bundy, the last piece fell into place, and the fear I thought I had left behind came rushing back stronger than ever. Ted Bundy was one of the most dangerous serial killers in American history, responsible for the deaths of dozens of women during the 70s. He was known for being charming, intelligent, and trustworthy, which made him even more terrifying. Daniel and I sat in silence after the program ended, both of us fully aware of how thin the line had been between survival and disappearance. We had escaped only because timing worked in our favor. I still think about that night, about how easily things could have gone differently, and how close we were to becoming another story told on a screen.
The first thing people notice about this story is his name, but that is never where it really begins. It begins with how safe I thought I was, how convinced I was that nothing truly bad could happen. I tell this now because silence helped him for too long, and because pretending it was just a bad relationship almost killed me. When I met Lawrence, he was already known. Not famous, but close enough that people recognized him in bars and restaurants. Close enough that strangers smiled at him like he had already proven something. He spoke softly, smiled easily, and never raised his voice in public. He liked to say he respected women, and people believed him because he said it so calmly. At the beginning, he treated me like something fragile he wanted to protect. He insisted on driving me everywhere, paying for everything, and planning my days around his schedule. When I thanked him, he corrected me and said I didn't need to thank him for being a man. I thought that sounded mature. I thought it meant stability. What I did not understand yet was that protection, when you do not ask for it, slowly turns into a cage. The control did not arrive violently, and that is why I missed it. It arrived wrapped in concern, in advice, in long explanations about danger and stress, and how people like him lived under constant pressure. He told me I did not need to work so much. He told me my friends were careless. He told me the city was not safe for someone like me. Before anything physical happened, my world became very small. He did not forbid me from leaving the house at first, but he made it exhausting. Every plan required a discussion. Every errand came with questions. If I wanted to go out alone, he wanted updates. If I stayed too long, he wanted reasons. It was easier to stay home than to explain myself. The drinking became impossible to ignore. Bottles appeared faster than they disappeared. He started missing training sessions and laughed about it like it was a joke the coaches just did not get. When the suspension came after he drove drunk, the joke ended and the house changed. He stayed home all day, watching games, replays, interviews, and old highlights. Football never stopped. Each touchdown replay felt like it pulled something dark out of him, something tight and restless that needed an outlet. I did not know yet that I was becoming that outlet. After the suspension, the tension stopped hiding. The days grew heavier, slower, and more dangerous because I never knew which version of him I would face. Sometimes he ignored me completely, sitting inches from the screen with a drink in his hand, jaw clenched, eyes fixed like the game was happening inside his head. Other times he followed me through the house, correcting how I walked, how I cleaned, how I spoke. Before the first real beating, there were hours of pressure that felt unbearable. One afternoon, he accused me of distracting him during a game. I was standing behind the couch, not speaking, not moving, just existing in the room. He stood up suddenly, grabbed my arm, and squeezed until my fingers went numb. He did not shout. He spoke slowly and told me I needed to learn when to disappear. When I tried to pull away, he shoved me backward into the wall. My head hit hard enough to make my vision blur. He stared at me afterward, breathing heavy, like he was waiting for something from me. When I started crying, he walked away in disgust. From that day on, fear became part of my routine. I moved carefully. I spoke less. I slept lightly. I learned the sound of his steps and the rhythm of his drinking. I knew when to stay silent and when to answer quickly. None of it was enough. The night he dragged me to the basement did not begin with shouting. It began with football highlights playing too loudly and him drinking faster than usual. I tried to stay upstairs, but he called my name, slow and sharp, and I knew ignoring him would only make things worse. When I reached the living room, he accused me of disrespecting him, of planning to leave, of thinking I was better than him. Before I could move away, he grabbed my hair and pulled me toward the stairs. I tried to hold on to the railing, but he kicked my hands away and dragged me step by step, my back hitting each edge, my body twisting in ways that left bruises everywhere. The pain was loud and constant, and he did not stop even when I screamed. The basement was dark, cold, and empty. He threw me inside, locked the door, and turned the light off. For 5 days, that room was my entire world. He gave me little water, never enough to feel okay, just enough to keep me alive. Once a day, he threw in a piece of hard bread like I was an animal. He told me this was what happened to women who forgot their place. He told me no one would come. He told me I deserved it. The psychological damage was worse than the hunger. He came down randomly, sometimes calm, sometimes furious, sometimes drunk and rambling. He made me beg. He laughed when I cried. He threatened to leave me there forever. By the 3rd day, I stopped counting time and started counting footsteps. When he finally unlocked the door and pulled me upstairs, my legs barely worked. Before the final assault, the house felt like it was holding its breath. I told him I was leaving. I said it clearly. I said it slowly. I said I would go to the police. His reaction was immediate and terrifying because there was no explosion, no screaming, no warning. He pushed me against the wall and wrapped his hands around my neck. His grip was steady, calculated, and strong. I tried to hit him, but my arms were weak from days without food. The pressure increased slowly, like he wanted me to understand exactly what was happening. The room spun. My lungs burned, my thoughts scattered. I could hear the television behind him, the crowd cheering as if nothing in the world was wrong. When I collapsed, he let go. I hit the floor and could not move. He stepped over me, grabbed another drink, and passed out on the couch. I stayed still for a long time, afraid that even breathing might wake him. I escaped while he slept. I did not take anything with me. I did not look back. I ran until my chest hurt and my vision blurred, then I ran more. When the police arrived, they took photos, wrote reports, and promised protection. He was arrested, then released, then protected by the same system that loved his talent more than it cared about my life. Years passed, but his violence did not stop. Arrests followed him. Charges piled up. Guards reported attacks. Cellmates feared him. His behavior grew more unstable, more dangerous, until it finally ended the only way it ever could. When I heard what he did in prison and what he did to himself afterward, my body reacted before my mind did. Cold, shaking, numbness. Justice came late, but it came loud. Every football game reminds me how easily violence is excused when talent is involved. People ask why I stayed, why I didn't leave sooner, why I didn't see it coming. The truth is simple and ugly. Fear works slowly, control hides well, and monsters rarely look like monsters at the beginning.
Lawrence Phillips was a former NFL and college football star whose career was marked as much by extreme violence as by athletic talent. Despite repeated incidents of domestic abuse and criminal behavior during his playing years, he continued to be protected by teams and institutions as long as he performed on the field. After his career ended, the violence escalated rather than stopped. In 2015, while serving a prison sentence for multiple offenses, Phillips murdered his cellmate and later took his own life.
The first serious threat came after a Friday night game, when the football player Aaron Hernandez leaned close and calmly explained where I lived, how long it took me to get home, and what time my lights usually turned off. He said it like he was giving directions, not like a warning. And that was when I understood this was not part of the game anymore. I worked as a football referee for years, long enough to learn that players never forgive calls they think are unfair. Most of the time, anger stays on the field, and it burns out once the game ends. Sometimes it follows you, but you learn to ignore it because stopping feels like letting them win. Being Latino added another layer that the league never really wanted to talk about. Insults were disguised as jokes, and threats were dismissed as heat-of-the-moment reactions. Reports were filed, meetings were held, and nothing actually changed. Aaron Hernandez was different from the rest. He did not shout to impress his teammates, and he didn't lose control in obvious ways. He watched, he waited, and he spoke when he knew no one else was listening. The harassment became routine, slowly, which made it harder to explain and easier to deny. Cars followed me after games, always keeping the same distance, always turning away right before I reached my street. My car was scratched more than once, and the damage was too deliberate to be random. Aaron and a few other players made sure I noticed them outside the stadium. They parked near my house on different nights, sometimes sitting there without music, without talking, just watching. When I confronted the league, they suggested changing my route home and avoiding public places. My closest support was Mateo, another referee who had dealt with the same group of players. He understood the pressure because he felt it too, and we talked constantly about how long we could keep doing this before something went wrong. The game that changed everything was tense from the start. The crowd was aggressive, the bench was loud, and Aaron never stopped staring at us. It felt organized, not emotional, like they were waiting for an excuse. Before the first major incident, there was a long stretch where nothing happened, and that silence made everyone uneasy. Players stood too close after plays. Conversations stopped when we approached, and the bench reacted to every call with hostility. When Mateo called a late hit, Aaron stepped forward immediately, getting close enough that his helmet touched. His voice was low but clear, and he promised Mateo would regret humiliating him in front of everyone. Several players laughed, while others watched carefully like they were memorizing the moment. Later, Aaron delivered another illegal hit, and Mateo ejected him without hesitation. The reaction was violent, with players shouting, security hesitating, and objects thrown from the stands. Aaron walked off slowly, turning back just once to smile at us, as if this was exactly what he wanted. After the game, we waited inside longer than usual, listening to shouting outside and watching shadows move past the windows. Mateo admitted he was scared, not of losing his job, but of what would happen once we left the stadium. That fear stayed with us in the following days, growing stronger instead of fading, especially when calls and messages started coming from unknown numbers late at night. Mateo was killed 3 days after the game, and the police said the attack was intentional and personal. His body had been mutilated, and the level of violence made it clear that this was meant to send a message, rather than hide a crime. Before the package arrived, there was another quiet stretch that felt wrong, like something was being prepared. When I opened my door and saw the box on my porch, my body reacted before my thoughts did, and I stepped back instead of picking it up. Inside was one of Mateo's severed body parts, wrapped carefully, without any note or explanation. The message was obvious, and I spent the rest of that day sitting on the floor, listening for sounds that didn't belong in my house. That night, a car parked across the street with its headlights on, and had stayed there until morning. When I looked outside, someone inside raised a hand slowly, as if waving. I stopped sleeping after that, and every sound inside my home felt like a warning. The attacks became direct after the package. Someone entered my house while I was out and moved furniture just enough to be noticed. Doors were left unlocked, drawers were opened, and personal items were placed where I couldn't ignore them. The most dangerous incident happened in a grocery store parking lot during one afternoon. I noticed footsteps behind me, and then I was hit from the side, hard enough to knock me down. I was dragged between cars while someone whispered my name and reminded me that quitting would not erase what I had done. They kicked me until I stopped trying to get up, and one of them pressed a knee into my chest while explaining that Aaron Hernandez never got disrespected. When they left, they warned me that the next visit would be worse. I was taken to the hospital and questioned again by police, who repeatedly said that they were doing everything they could. I didn't believe them. I stopped leaving my house unless it was absolutely necessary. After the attack, the fear stopped feeling situational and became constant, following me even inside places that were supposed to be safe. I stopped answering the phone entirely because every ring made my body tighten, and when I checked the voicemail later, I found recordings of heavy breathing and low voices repeating my name, slowly. One message mentioned the street where I lived and described the color of the car parked outside that night, and that detail alone was enough to convince me that someone was always nearby, paying attention to every movement I made. A few days later, I realized someone had been inside my apartment again, but this time, while I was home. I noticed when I found my bedroom door partially opened, even though I clearly remembered closing it. The television was muted, the remote placed carefully on the table, and one of my shoes was moved to the middle of the room, as if to make sure I would see it immediately. I stood there for a long time without moving, listening to the sounds of the building, trying to understand if I was alone or if someone was still watching me from somewhere I couldn't see. When Aaron was arrested for an unrelated murder days later, people assumed the danger had passed. I knew better, because the fear did not disappear. It settled in. Aaron Hernandez received a life sentence, but the relief people expected never came. The damage was already done. I live quietly now, but I never feel alone, even when no one's around. Sounds still wake me, and I still check locks more than once. This story is not about football anymore. It's about what happens when violence is allowed to grow unchecked, and how easily it crosses lines that cannot be undone. I'm telling this because silence did not protect Mateo, and it did not protect me, and because fear does not disappear just because a case is closed. Aaron Hernandez was a former NFL tight end whose rapid rise to fame collapsed after his involvement in multiple violent crimes. In 2013, he was arrested and later convicted for the murder of Odin Lloyd, a semi-professional football player who had been dating his fiance's sister. As investigations expanded, Hernandez was also linked to other shootings, revealing a pattern of paranoia, aggression, and criminal behavior that had gone unnoticed during his career. He took his life in prison in 2017.
People think obsession is easy to spot. That's not true. Obsession can sound calm, reasonable, and even caring when you first hear it, and that's how it slips into your life without asking for permission. I met Galen when I was barely holding things together. I was working, studying, and trying to act older than I felt. He was charming in a strange way, confident when talking about football, especially college football, like it was the only thing in the world that made sense to him. At first, that focus felt reassuring, like he had something solid to stand on. He talked about the Colorado Buffaloes constantly, but one player's name always came up: Ray Caruth. Galen talked about him like you talk about someone you actually knew, someone whose choices mattered beyond the field. I didn't question it back then because I didn't know what I was listening to yet. When I got pregnant, everything accelerated. There was no long discussion, no real planning. We moved in together because neither of us could afford not to. The house was small, the walls were thin, and every sound traveled, which meant there was never any real privacy or silence. At that point, I still believed things could stabilize. I didn't know I was already inside a story that was heading somewhere violent. Galen's admiration didn't stay abstract. It turned physical, visual, and constant. He started dressing like Caruth, copying old photos and game footage down to the smallest details. Same jackets, same posture, same way of walking into a room like everyone should notice. He didn't just talk about Carruth, he studied him. He repeated phrases Carruth used in interviews, adjusted his voice to match his tone, and even practiced expressions in the mirror. It stopped feeling like fandom and started feeling like rehearsal. Our conversations narrowed fast. Everything led back to Carruth. Money problems, relationships, responsibility, fatherhood. Galen always framed it the same way, saying the world punishes men who get trapped by expectations. He said football players were proof of that. Before the arguments, there was always a stretch of silence that felt deliberate. He would sit scrolling through court documents or watching interviews, barely blinking, barely reacting. When I mentioned separating, he didn't raise his voice. He smiled and explained why that wouldn't work. He talked about unity, legacy, and not repeating mistakes. Even though I never said those words myself, I started to feel like my role in my own life was shrinking. The first physical incident happened during one of those long silences, when I tried to leave the room to avoid another lecture about loyalty and sacrifice. His hand closed around my wrist, not crushing it, but firm enough to stop me completely. He didn't apologize and he didn't look angry. He explained his behavior like he was correcting a misunderstanding. That night, he wore a Buffalo's jersey that barely fit him and stood in front of the mirror for a long time, adjusting it and talking quietly to himself. I stayed on the bed listening, trying to slow my breathing while my thoughts raced in circles I couldn't control. Before the next incident, tension built in smaller ways. He slept less, paced more, and muttered names and dates like they were instructions. He stopped asking how I felt and started telling me what I was supposed to feel. When the news about Carruth's arrest came out, I expected denial or anger. Instead, Galen reacted with calm approval. He watched the coverage closely and nodded along as if each detail confirmed something he already believed. He made a hard choice. Some people don't understand what it takes. The way he said hard choice stayed with me, because it sounded less like commentary and more like preparation. Their star player had been accused of murdering his pregnant partner to avoid paying child support. It disgusts me just thinking about it. Meanwhile, we were going to have a child together. For me, Gail's unhealthy obsession with Ray ended there. After that, Galen changed, not explosively, but methodically. He started attending court hearings, sitting quietly in the back, taking notes and coming home energized. He talked about respect, about controlling the narrative, about how history remembers men who act decisively. Before every argument, there was a heavy buildup where he watched footage late into the night, pausing and rewinding specific moments. I could hear him breathing faster, tapping his fingers, whispering comments under his breath. When I finally said I was leaving, I expected yelling or threats. Instead, he stayed calm, which made everything worse. He told me leaving would complicate things and that complicated situations force people to make mistakes. You're not thinking clearly right now. I moved in with my sister and blocked his number. For a few days, nothing happened. That absence felt artificial, like the pause before something breaks. Then messages started arriving from unfamiliar numbers. Long messages explaining why separation would hurt everyone involved, why suffering could be avoided, why decisive action was sometimes mercy. I stopped reading them halfway through, but the tone lingered in my head. At night, I kept replaying his voice, not loud or aggressive, but certain, as if certainty itself could justify anything. The day he came to my sister's house, tension filled the space long before I saw him. Every sound outside made my attention snap toward the door, and my thoughts jumped ahead faster than I could slow them down. When his voice came through the door, it was controlled and steady, like he was trying not to alarm anyone nearby. I didn't open it right away. I stood there listening, focusing on his breathing, on the rhythm of his words, trying to predict his next move. When he forced the door open, he didn't rush me. He stepped inside calmly and closed it behind him, as if this was a private conversation that had been interrupted earlier. "You're not going to ruin my life. Gail is right, you shouldn't exist. I'm ruined because of you and the future baby. I backed away toward the kitchen, keeping distance without freezing. He followed at the same pace, explaining himself, describing a future where problems didn't exist anymore. His hand moved toward his jacket, slow and deliberate. I grabbed a lamp and swung it, hitting his arm hard enough to make him step back. He adjusted quickly and kept moving, his expression tightening but never breaking into panic. When he grabbed my hair, pain shot through my scalp, but I didn't stop moving. I hit his face with my elbow, felt the impact, and used the moment to break free. I ran, screaming, not stopping until neighbors came out and someone called the police. After his arrest, everything felt unreal. I gave my statement multiple times, each version feeling less connected to my body, like I was describing events that happened to someone else. I didn't feel brave or relieved. I felt emptied out. In court, he never looked at me. He stared forward, wearing that same serious expression. The restraining order and sentence followed. I raised my child alone. Sometimes I still think about how calm Galen was, even at the worst moments, and how certainty can be more dangerous than anger. I don't feel victorious. I tell this story so others understand that terror doesn't always announce itself. This story mentions Ray Caruth, an NFL wide receiver whose career ended after he orchestrated the murder of his pregnant girlfriend, Cherika Adams, in 1999. Caruth arranged for Adams to be ambushed and shot while he followed in another car. Adams survived long enough to give birth to their son, who was left with permanent brain damage. Caruth was convicted for his role in the crime and sentenced to prison, becoming one of the most notorious criminal cases involving a professional football player.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I'm a former NFL player, and this is an experience I had back when I was playing football nationally. I still remember the day when I was drafted into the NFL. It was like a dream come true for me. Back when I was in college, my coach used to always tell me that I would make it big, and I did. But little did I know that being in the spotlight in front of the whole nation playing football would be so pressuring. Playing with teams that I had always admired from afar was a boon and a bane in its own way. Even the players on my own team were guys that I had been a fan of. Slowly but surely, the spotlight and the pressure started to affect my game, and for 2 consecutive games, I was benched. My teammates could see that I was struggling to handle the pressure and that our team was suffering because of it. That's when I decided that I had to do something about it and step up my game. So I decided to ask my coach to put a word in with the stadium authorities to allow me to practice every night all by myself. My coach was a nice and kind-hearted man, and he had seen my struggles firsthand. So he spoke to the authorities, and soon enough, I was granted access to the stadium every night. At first, I struggled to play alone as football is a team game. But soon I realized what my mistakes were, and I started working on them. Some nights, my coach would accompany me, but most of the nights, I was alone. My solo practice might have gone for about a few weeks when we had a big match coming up. The team that we were going up against was the nation's best back then, and truth be told, I was utterly terrified of playing against them. Even though my teammates have played against them, they had never won, and this cannot be even more. The night before the big match, all my teammates were resting in preparation for the next day's big event, but I was on edge. I was in the stadium sweating myself on the field. It wasn't easy playing against all those big faces, but I was determined to prove myself. That's when I heard somebody walking on the field. I turned and saw a familiar face, a face that I did not expect to see in the stadium so late at night. Now, let's call this player Joe Maxfield, as I do not want to reveal his true identity. But he was one of the star players of the opposite team, the team that we were going up against the next day. He was totally clad in his football gear and had a ball in his hand. It looked like he too wanted to practice one last time before the big game. I was stunned to see him, but continued practicing myself. A few minutes later, he walked towards me and spoke.
Hey man, how are you? You must be the new kid drafted by your team, right?
I was so awestruck that for a few seconds, I just kept looking at him with a ball in my hand and my mouth ajar. When he chuckled looking at me, I controlled myself and spoke. Yeah,
I'm the one. So what you been doing here so late at night? Preparing for tomorrow's game? Yes, sir, I replied. Me too, man. I am worried about playing against your team, too. We might have won against them all the time, but those are tough players, and so are you. I honestly had nothing to say to him, so I just looked at him, dumbfounded. He chuckled again and said, "Want to play with me tonight?" "It would be an honor, sir," I replied. So for the next 2 hours, I played with probably the greatest player of our age, and he was the nicest, friendliest person I had ever come across. He gave me a lot of tips, corrected me when I was wrong, and also shared some secrets about the playing tactics of his own team. I had never expected to share a moment with such a great player, but there I was, learning from the best player of our generation. By the time we were done, he placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't let the lights, the bling, all the watching eyes, and the pressure from the media get to you, kid. You focus on your game and see how it goes from there." That was truly the best piece of advice somebody had given me till that day. Soon we said goodbye and promised to see each other the next day. I drove back to my hotel room with a satisfied mind and a happy heart. The next day I was woken up by my teammates, and all of them looked utterly sad. I instantly knew that something was wrong. Something terrible had happened, but I just did not know what. "Hey guys, what's going on? What's happening?" I asked them. "Hey bro, do you know Joe passed away? They say he had a heart attack in his sleep. Man, it was so unexpected. We were supposed to play against this team tonight, and he's no more. I think the match has been canceled." Jeff, one of my teammates, told me, "Wait, what do you mean Joe has passed away? When did this happen?" "They say it was probably yesterday or around midnight. Nothing has been clear yet, but the news is confirmed that Joe Maxfield is no more." Jeff confirmed once again. I just sat in the bed thinking to myself, how would it be possible? As I was playing with him into the early hours of the morning. I knew no one would believe me if I told them what happened last night. Soon, we were all officially informed that the game had been canceled and that Joe had died around midnight. The whole nation was grieving the loss of a legend, but I was still confused as hell. A few days later, I got my answers when me and my teammates attended Joe's funeral. When I walked near the coffin, I kid you not, I saw Joe's lips tilt upward a bit. The moment was so minute that only my eyes caught it. But it was as if he was trying to tell me and reassure me that he was there with me that night. After that day, I never looked back and took his advice. And now, years later, I am a successful NFL player who had recently retired. After his funeral, I searched the internet to investigate Joe's early life before he was famous. An article in a magazine said that Joe too struggled with the same problem I was struggling with, and one night he met someone who changed his life forever. Now that I look at it after so many years, I think Joe's spirit was trying to pass on the kindness he had experienced once upon a time at the start of his career.
The island looked like paradise in the brochure, but once we got there, it felt like a bad copy of one. The beach was empty, the water murky, and the cabins were too far from each other. Anna didn't seem to care. She said she wanted peace and privacy. I thought she meant time together. A young guy met us at the dock. He wore a shirt that said staff and had that awkward smile people use when they're not paid enough to deal with tourists. His name was Leo. He helped us carry our bags, eyes darting between us like he was trying to read something in our faces. Our cabin was small, with creaky floors and a bed that smelled like bleach. Anna unpacked quietly, folding her clothes with this mechanical precision that made me feel like she'd done it alone 1,000 times before. We tried to talk. She nodded without listening. At dinner, she was different. She laughed, touched my hand, said she was happy. I believed her. We went back to the cabin and she poured the wine that came on the house. It was bitter, but she insisted I drink more. By the time I realized how heavy my eyelids felt, it was too late. I woke up to the sound of a fly buzzing near my ear. My head throbbed. My arms were behind me. my ankles tied to the chair legs. For a few seconds, I didn't even panic. I just stared at the rope, trying to understand what kind of joke this was. Then I saw her. Anna was sitting on the bed, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone like she was waiting for a delivery. Her hair was up, her makeup perfect. When she finally looked at me, she didn't flinch. She just said, "You shouldn't have trusted me so easily." A man came out of the bathroom, tall, tanned, confident. He smiled at me the way people smile at something already broken. He kissed her in front of me, slow and deliberate. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat was dry, my body too weak to fight. He asked her when they should start. She told him soon. Then she looked at me again, cold, detached, and said this had always been the plan. They'd been waiting for this trip. I was just a ticket to a payout, and my death would look like a stupid accident. Anna started talking like we were at dinner again. She said she wanted to clear the air before it all ended. She told me about Daniel, the man standing behind her, and how they had met long before I ever came into the picture. Every word felt like a nail going deeper. She said she married for convenience, that she'd already planned how it would happen. The insurance money, the fake witnesses, the tragic story of the husband who fell from the dock after drinking too much. She spoke with no emotion, as if she were describing someone else's life. Then she grabbed a knife from the table and started tracing it along my arm, light enough not to cut. She asked if I ever wondered why she picked me. I didn't answer. She pressed harder until a drop of blood slid down my wrist. Daniel told her to hurry up, that they needed to make it look clean. She ignored him, focusing on me, smiling. She said this was her favorite part, when people realized they were never loved. I kept my mouth shut. There was nothing I could say that would make her stop. While all this was happening, Leo was doing his last walk before going to sleep. He passed by our cabin and saw Anna through the thin curtains. She was talking to someone who wasn't me. He couldn't see the man's face clearly, but it was enough to make him stop walking. He froze. For a few seconds, he stayed still, then turned around and started walking away fast. Before he reached the path to the main building, a door slammed behind him. Daniel was there, and Leo could see him perfectly. Leo didn't look back. He ran. Outside, Daniel had gone after Leo. He sprinted down the sand path, cutting through the trees toward the main dock. The wind carried Daniel's voice, angry, desperate, getting closer. Leo tripped once, scraped his hand on a rock, but didn't stop. The tension was unbearable. Every sound felt amplified. The crunch of sand, the rustle of leaves, the thud of footsteps behind him. When he finally saw the dim light of the service shack near the dock, he started shouting for help. 2 maintenance workers were there, half asleep, and one of them grabbed a flashlight. By the time Daniel reached the clearing, Leo was already behind the workers. The men didn't know what was happening, but Daniel stopped when he saw them. He stood there, breathing hard, his shirt soaked in sweat, eyes wild. The workers threatened to call the police, and Daniel turned back, disappearing into the dark path. Leo didn't wait. He used the radio inside the shack to call for help. The connection was weak, but it went through. The local police were already on another part of the island, close enough to respond. Back in the cabin, Anna was getting restless. She checked her phone again, muttering that Daniel was taking too long. She paced around, kicking the burnt photo ashes from the floor. I stayed quiet, wrists raw, trying to loosen the rope without her noticing. She suddenly stopped and looked out the window. Headlights. For a split second, she looked confused. The sound of boots and voices hit the silence. She rushed toward the knife, but before she could reach it, the door burst open. 3 officers came in, shouting. She froze. One of them grabbed her arms while the others spread out, checking the room. Daniel was dragged in seconds later, covered in dirt, screaming at her not to say anything. She shouted his name like a warning, but no one cared. One of the officers cut the ropes off my wrists. My hands were shaking too much to move. I remember them pulling me up, guiding me outside, asking if I was hurt. I couldn't answer. The air outside felt thick, full of gasoline and sea salt. They sat me on the steps while they cuffed the 2 of them. Anna kept her eyes on me the whole time. Not angry, not scared, just empty. They were both charged. Attempted murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud. The case made headlines for a few days because it was too cinematic to be real. Anna didn't speak at the trial, but Daniel did. He said it was all her idea. She smiled when he said it, like she was proud. Leo testified, too, and that was the only reason I knew his part of the story. He said he didn't understand what he saw that night until it was too late. The officers called him the reason I was alive. I thanked him once outside at the courthouse. He just said, "Don't mention it," and left before the reporters could find him. In 2017, Antonio Navarro Cerdan was murdered in Valencia, Spain. His wife, Maria Jesus Moreno Canto, widely known as Maggi, the Black Widow, and her lover were convicted of planning and carrying out the crime. The case became a media sensation due to its mix of passion, betrayal, and manipulation. Maggi maintained an affair while plotting her husband's death, using her lover to execute the plan. Though not a honeymoon murder, it perfectly fits the pattern of love, deceit, and fatal obsession that later inspired a film and a documentary adaptation.
Clara and I arrived in Bali on a humid Tuesday afternoon. The heat felt like it was pressing down on us the moment we stepped out of the airport. We'd been married less than a year, and this was supposed to be our big vacation, somewhere quiet, far from everything. The hotel looked perfect online, isolated on a cliffside with a private pool and an ocean view. It was exactly what she wanted. The staff was polite but distant. No one smiled too long. A man helped us with our luggage but didn't say a word. I remember Clara whispering that he never made eye contact. We ignored it and went to our room. It was small but nice. White sheets, bamboo furniture, and a sliding door that opened to the balcony. The air smelled like salt and mildew. That first night was calm. We had dinner at the hotel restaurant, drank too much wine, and went back to the room laughing. I fell asleep first. When I woke up around 3 a.m., I heard something that sounded like someone pacing slowly outside our door. I waited, listening. It stopped after a minute, and I convinced myself it was the sound of the night guard doing rounds. I didn't mention it to Clara. The next morning, we went down for breakfast. I noticed two men sitting in the corner near the entrance. Both wore dark shirts and sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. One of them stared at me when I looked up. I turned away quickly, pretending I hadn't noticed. By the second night, Clara was acting restless. She said she didn't feel safe, like someone was always watching us. I tried to calm her down, but truthfully, I'd seen the same two men near the pool that afternoon. They weren't guests, I could tell. They didn't swim or talk to anyone. They just sat there, pretending to scroll on their phones, always facing us. We spent most of the evening in our room. Clara wanted to call her parents, but they didn't answer. I told her I'd go down to the front desk to ask about it. The lobby was empty except for the same man who carried our bags on the first day. He was wiping the counter slowly, like he wasn't listening. I asked about the internet, and he just nodded without looking at me. I went back upstairs, uneasy. When I entered the room, Clara was sitting on the bed, pale. She said someone had knocked while I was gone, just 2 soft taps on the door. When she looked through the peephole, there was no one there. I checked the hallway, nothing. The silence in that corridor didn't feel normal. It felt staged, like everyone was waiting for something. I locked the door and pushed a chair under the handle. We kept the lights on the rest of the night. I didn't sleep. Every small sound from outside made me jump. Around 4 a.m, I heard another knock, this time slower, deliberate. Clara covered her mouth, shaking. I didn't open it. We tried to act normal in the morning. Went to the beach, took some photos, pretended things were fine, but it wasn't. The same two men were there again, sitting under an umbrella not far from us. One of them was pretending to read a newspaper, upside down. Clara wanted to go back to the hotel immediately. That night she told me she wanted to leave. I checked flights, but everything was full until Friday. She suggested we call the embassy. I told her to wait one more day. Maybe we were just overthinking it. But I was lying. Every time I turned around, I expected to see those men again. The tension grew heavier as the sun went down. We ate dinner in silence and went straight to our room. Around midnight, we heard a sound. A slow, dragging noise outside the door, like fabric sliding over the floor. We froze. Then came 3 short knocks. Clara whispered that we should call the front desk. I tried, but the phone was dead. No tone, no signal. I stared at the door for what felt like hours. When I finally looked through the peephole, all I saw was darkness. Nothing had happened. Next night, our last night there, Clara was exhausted. She hadn't slept properly since we arrived. Her eyes looked sunken, her voice cracked every time she spoke. I promised her we'd leave the next day no matter what. She nodded, but didn't say anything. We ordered food to the room. When the knock came, I hesitated before opening. It was a hotel worker holding a tray, smiling faintly. I thanked him, gave him a tip, and closed the door. The meal tasted like nothing. I remember how quiet it was while we ate, the air conditioner humming unevenly. Later, Clara took a shower. I sat on the edge of the bed scrolling through my phone, trying to book an earlier flight. Then another knock. Gentle, familiar. I told myself it was room service collecting dishes. I got up and opened the door. The 2 men were standing there. One of them raised something shiny, metal, and before I could speak, it smashed against my face. Pain exploded in my skull. My vision blurred. I fell backward, hearing Clara scream from the bathroom. I tried to get up, but a boot hit my ribs. I saw one of them grab her by the arm, dragging her out. She kicked, hit him, screamed my name, but the other man punched her hard enough to silence her. I crawled forward, reaching for her, but another hit came down. Everything went dark. When I woke up, the room was dim and smelled like blood and wet fabric. My head throbbed. The bed was upside down, the curtains torn, the bathroom door was open. Lights still on. Clara was gone. I called her name, my throat raw. No answer. I stumbled into the hallway, empty. The entire floor looked deserted. No staff, no guests. I ran to the elevator, but it didn't respond. I took the stairs to the lobby, shouting for help. The front desk was empty again. Phones disconnected. I felt like the whole hotel had died overnight. I went back to the room, dizzy. Everything looked untouched, except for one thing. A large black suitcase sitting near the balcony. It was ours, but we hadn't used it since the first day. My stomach turned. I stepped closer, each step slower than the last. The zipper was half open. I knelt down and pulled it. A wave of rot hit me. Her hair was the first thing I saw. Tangled, blonde, stiff. Her skin was pale, lips cracked open. She was folded inside, knees bent unnaturally against her chest. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. I couldn't scream, I just sat there shaking. The world silent, except for the sound of the zipper still dangling. The police arrived hours later. I don't remember calling them. Maybe someone else did. They dragged me out of the room, sat me down in the lobby, and questioned me for hours. They thought I did it, said it looked like a domestic murder. My fingerprints were everywhere. I told them about the men, the knocks, the attack. No one believed me. It wasn't until they checked the cameras that they saw two figures entering our floor at midnight and leaving 20 minutes later with something heavy between them. The hotel staff claimed they'd never seen those men before, but one of the officers, an older guy, told me quietly that they'd been following Clara for days before the trip. A week later, Interpol confirmed it. Her father had been involved in some shady business deals back home. Money laundering, stolen assets, offshore accounts. The men worked for one of the people he'd cheated. They couldn't find him, so they found her instead. That's why they waited. That's why they followed us. They used me as a witness, not a suspect. But every night since then, I've dreamed of that suitcase, of the zipper closing, sealing her inside while I was lying unconscious just a few feet away. It's horrible. It's like I can see how it happened, but in reality, I know it was probably much worse. The story I'm about to tell you may seem rather improbable, but rest assured that if my story were not hard to believe, I would not be alive. It all started that fateful Saturday. My wife and I had just gotten married and decided to start our honeymoon. This was my first day of honeymoon with her, and we were going to an island paradise on a beautiful cruise ship. Everything was going well until a strong storm hit the cruise ship with full force. The ship was going back and forth, furniture and pictures were falling down, children were crying, and some parents with seasickness were vomiting so much that they couldn't calm them down. The captain gathered us in the main salon to give us some tranquility. The rain stopped after a few minutes, but the cruise ship lost its course. Out of nowhere, a loud bang on the bottom of the ship alerted everyone. The ship's workers went down to see what was happening, and in a few seconds, the screams began. Violent screams, full of pain and panic, covered every meter of the cruise ship. Then, silence. The captain told us to lock ourselves in our rooms. From there, the nightmare began. In a matter of minutes, the lights went out and the screams multiplied. When we thought of leaving the room, it was too late. The screams were getting closer and closer. "Please help us! It's right behind us! Please! No!"
What should we do? Should we help them?
No. We don't know what's going on. We could be in danger too, especially if we go that way.
And we are just going to stand here?
No. For now, we should hide under the bed.
Why?
Because someone can be attacking us, like terrorists or something.
Terrorists? In a cruise?
I don't know, okay? But we really should hide. If we see water in the floor, the cruise is sinking. Then we should run upstairs, but only if that happens.
Okay, you're right.
What was it that was killing all the passengers? The noise came from below. Did a submarine hit us? Suddenly, my bedroom door exploded. My wife and I were hiding under the bed when we saw what came in. It was a miracle we didn't scream. A strange being was standing in front of us. It looked like an amphibian, but its legs were positioned like those of a human. It inspected the room for a while, and, disinterested, it left. We thought about staying hidden until the monster left, but we began to feel water brushing against our toes. The ship was flooding. We took a chance and ran out of the room, and when I turned around to look back, I saw it. It was a huge being, more than 2 meters long. It was a huge amphibian with a huge toad head. When it looked at me, I noticed that it was swallowing a person. The victim was being swallowed without being chewed, as if it was entering a black hole. The legs kicked desperately until suddenly they stopped moving and ended up entering the amphibian's mouth. Once it had devoured its prey, the creature began to run towards us. It was very fast, and the big head start we had wasn't enough. In an act of desperation, I grabbed a decorative painting and used it to attack the monster and buy us some time. To my surprise, the monster dodged me without any difficulty. At that moment, I realized that I was about to die, exposed before this horrendous and dangerous being. But to my surprise, something much worse happened. The monster ignored me and kept running. He never chased me. He wanted my wife. My wife made it to the door, but before she could close it, the monster reached in. She used all her strength to try and close it, but it was obvious that she was giving in to the horrendous being. As the monster was about to open the door, I hit it using the frame with all of my strength. Being distracted, it didn't dodge my blow, and I managed to stun it for a few seconds, which I used to go to my wife and close the door before it reached us. I told my wife to run, that I would stay and lock the door, and if either of us let go, we would both die. She understood and ran desperately, and when she got far enough away, I let go of the door and started running. This time I had no chance. The monster was too close and would catch up with me. I started to escape through the side of the huge cruiser, and when I was about to be the next victim of the amphibian, I jumped into the water, praying it wouldn't catch me. When I fell in the water, there was no trace of the monster near me, so I breathed a sigh of relief. There was no way it could catch my wife. Near me was a person with a life jacket. The man might have been protected from drowning, but he had a huge wound that cost him his life. I took the life jacket and looked up as a helicopter was arriving above me. I couldn't see well, but I recognized my wife inside the helicopter. After that, I swam away as I watched the cruiser sink. I didn't want to be near that monster when it happened. A few hours later, I had a stroke of luck, and a small boat found me and picked me up. When I got ashore, I tried every way I could to contact my wife, but it was to no avail. Neither she nor any of the other passengers ever showed up again. No one ever reported what happened to that cruise ship. It was as if it never existed. When I tried to raise my voice, I only received mockery and some insults on the networks. But outside of them, I began to see how some people were watching me. They didn't even bother to hide. It was as if they wanted me to know that they were watching me. I don't know who these people are or what will happen to me in the future. I just want to find my wife and forget what happened with that terrifying monster. But every time I close my eyes, I see it.
The woods happened to be darker than I'd ever seen them that night, almost like I was in some sort of void that swallowed all the light within it. My flashlight was useless, and as I got closer to the horrific screams of my best friend, I found myself fighting the urge to turn around and flee. Leaving Malcolm behind wasn't a decision I was ready to make, though. But when I came face to face with what was supposed to be my best friend, with wet chunks of skin peeling from its body, it became clear to me that I had fallen for a trick, and whatever had called me here was never Malcolm. Instead, it appeared to be the devil itself. My name is Jonathan Shepard, and in the spring of 2023, I was invited back home to Davidson, North Carolina, for the burial of my friend Malcolm's dad. The memorial was held at their cabin home, and Malcolm, who'd been my childhood best friend, was someone I hadn't seen in months. While I felt things wouldn't be that different, I quickly realized after arrival that the Malcolm I'd known and the person I was meeting today were very different people. "Hey man, I'm so sorry for your loss." Malcolm said nothing when I first gave him my condolences. Instead, he remained laser-focused on something in the corner. I followed his gaze and noticed he was staring at Cooper, the family dog they'd had since childhood. I spoke again to get his attention. "Malcolm? Huh? Oh, Jonathan. It's good to see you, man.
When did you get in? Just this morning. I'm sorry about your dad. Oh, yes, we all are. Once again, his gaze drifted toward the dog, and there was a visible look of disgust on his face. Concerned, I decided to ask, "Hey, you keep staring at Cooper. What's up with that?" He looked at me confused and replied, "Cooper? Your dog? Oh, that thing. Something's wrong with that thing, but no one believes me." "Something's wrong with it? What, like it's sick or something?" "Oh, please, I wish that thing was sick. Hopefully it'd just die and stop making my life hell. No one fucking believes me when I say it, but that is not our fucking dog." The dog had also been staring at us this whole time, completely still, almost like it was trying not to move. Still, what Malcolm was saying was crazy, and I wondered to myself what else the dog could be. "Listen, man, I came back a couple weeks ago from my Iowa trip, 'cause Dad was sick, and when I got here, that thing just went crazy. Wouldn't stop barking and staring at me like it didn't want me to see what it was doing here." "Well, it seems fine to me." "Yeah, 'cause they had to take it to the vet. But listen, that thing needs to be put down immediately." I could see the genuine concern in Malcolm's eyes. This wasn't the type of thing you'd focus on during your father's burial, but after speaking to his mom and others, they'd said it was something that had consumed him since he got home. For the rest of the day, I began to intentionally look out for the dog, and sure enough, wherever Malcolm was that day, the dog wasn't too far away, staring. Later at night, Malcolm's mom asked if I wanted to go up with her to clear out his dad's bedroom, as she'd been putting it off for a while, and was finally ready to get it over with. Once we got to the room a few minutes after getting into the cleaning, Malcolm's mom broke down into tears. After I comforted her and told her I could do it alone, she left, and I continued putting things away. Under the pillow, there was a journal that looked familiar. I remembered Malcolm's dad had a thing for poetry and used to read some of it to me when I was younger, so I sat for a moment and began flipping through the pages. What caught my attention was that as I neared the end of the book, I noticed a change from poetry to what seemed like day-to-day entries in the journal. Malcolm's dad seemed concerned about something in his home. He claimed the thing was deceptive, and although he was a sick old man, he was certain it wasn't who it said it was. As I read it, I couldn't help but notice how similar his words seemed to Malcolm's earlier that day. The last entry in the journal stood out to me the most, however, and as I read it, I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. My time on this earth is coming to an end, and for the life I've lived, I am content. However, a part of me fears for my family and those in my home. The devil that wears the face of my beloved is not who it says it is. If anyone would know, it would be me. I have tried to warn them, but I am not strong enough to convince anyone. I pray the evil leaves my home after I'm gone, and that the Lord protects my family when I will no longer be able to. As soon as I finished reading, a gut-wrenching scream tore through the silence and startled me. Shortly after, while clearly in pain, the person screamed, "Help, help me, please." I recognized Malcolm's voice almost immediately and hurried down the stairs to the rest of his family. All the guests had already left by that time, but I was worried by the fact that I couldn't find Malcolm's mom or anyone else in the house. "Help, please, anyone." The screams seemed to be getting louder. This time it sounded like his mother, and my hands trembled in fear. I wondered what the hell was happening, and the words of Malcolm's dad continued to run through my mind. Could this be what he was talking about? Still, I realized there was no time to ponder as I needed to help Malcolm and his mother. So I called the cops, gave them our location, and followed the voice out into the heart of the woods. The darkness swallowed all the light, and my flashlight only seemed to be able to show what was directly in front of me. As I walked deeper, the raw, piercing screams got louder and alternated between Malcolm's and his mother's, both pleading for help. After every scream was dead silence. No wind, no insects, no leaves. Only my footsteps could be heard along with the screams, and I knew that when nature was silent, it was a sign to turn and run. I couldn't bring myself to abandon them, however, so despite how much I trembled, I rushed forward, my heart racing, determined to get to them and help. As I moved through the woods, I could feel the screams getting closer and closer until I got to a clearing. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it and immediately stopped in my tracks. My heart sank, and my throat began to close up as the realization that I would probably die slowly dawned on me. Sitting in the center, hunched over, was Malcolm, or at least what wore his face. Wet chunks of skin lay on the ground around him and continued to fall off his body, revealing raw muscle and bone underneath. A foul stench of rot and something ancient filled the air, and I fought the urge to throw up from how disgusting it smelled. And its eyes, Malcolm's eyes, locked onto mine as it spoke. "Jonathan," it said in Malcolm's voice. Then it spoke again, this time in his mother's voice. "You came." The creature began to laugh in a deep, heavy tone that shook the ground underneath us. This wasn't Malcolm. It had never been Malcolm. This was the thing his father had warned about, the devil wearing familiar skin. You people are all so similar, all so gullible. You all can never resist the urge to help your loved ones in danger. That connection is what killed Malcolm when I first took his skin back in Iowa. That's what killed his pathetic mother earlier this night, and that's what is about to kill you, Jonathan. I fell back in horror as the creature approached. More skin fell from its flesh, and it continued to laugh in different voices, almost like it was taunting me. Then, out of nowhere, Cooper burst through the trees and lunged at the creature. "You disgusting little mutt." The creature struggled to peel Cooper off it, and while I'd hoped the outcome could have been different, I knew I only had a few seconds before Cooper was dead, and I would be next. So I ran. I turned and ran through the woods toward the distant sirens and red and blue lights. Then, once I got to the police, I began to mumble my words. I knew how crazy I was about to sound to anyone who heard the story. I knew they'd never believe me. No one would. But they had to know. Everyone had to know what had happened. So I spoke. "Help me. Help me. There's a skinwalker in the woods." My name is Ethan. I'm 32, and until 2 years ago, I believed every strange story had a rational explanation if you looked hard enough. That certainty died during one night in the Arizona desert, when something that shouldn't have known my mother's voice spent hours trying to talk me out of our truck. My brother Caleb loved photography, and that October he talked me into a weekend shooting the stars near Monument Valley. We packed up and drove out before sunrise, reaching a stretch of desert so isolated we hadn't seen another vehicle in an hour. Caleb found a clearing off an old dirt road. No cell service, no lights for miles, just a sky that looked like someone had spilled powdered glass across black velvet. For a couple of hours it felt like the most peaceful place on earth. Looking back, that was the last time either of us felt normal. It started with the silence, not ordinary quiet, but the kind that feels wrong once you notice it. No insects, no coyotes, no wind. Caleb froze mid-adjustment on his camera. "Do you hear that?" I listened. "Nothing." "Exactly," he said. I walked a few meters off to stretch my legs and stopped cold. Footprints, fresh, not ours, emerged from the dark and walked in a slow, deliberate line toward the truck. The sand around them was untouched, no trail leading away, no explanation for how they'd gotten there. They simply ended, 3 feet from the driver's door. The stride was too long, the toes too narrow, the impressions too deep for any normal weight. "They don't stop because someone disappeared," Caleb said, refusing to look away from them. "They stop because whatever made them doesn't need footprints anymore. My Navajo co-worker told me, if you hear something calling you out here, or find tracks that make no sense, you don't investigate. You leave." Then a whistle drifted across the dark behind us. Soft, playful. It came again, closer. Never loud enough to place, just close enough to know it had moved. We packed the truck in a rush, hands shaking, saying nothing. That's when the voice came. "Ethan?" It was my mother's voice, not similar, exact, down to the way she stretched my name when she wanted my attention. She'd been dead 6 years, but for one impossible moment I forgot that. And I took a step toward it before Caleb slammed both hands into my chest and shoved me back against the truck. "Your mom never called you sweetheart," he said, and my blood went cold. She hadn't. She only ever called me Bug. The voice had copied everything except the one detail that mattered, and somewhere in the dark, something laughed. A sound like someone remembering how laughter worked after years of forgetting it. Caleb threw the last camera in and we peeled out down the dirt road. In the side mirror, something kept pace with the truck, not running, just gliding through the brush at 50 miles an hour without ever falling behind. Then my phone buzzed. No signal, no bars, and a missed call from Mom, a number disconnected since her funeral. It rang again. When it stopped, a voicemail appeared out of nowhere. I played it. Static, breathing, and then her voice, quiet and patient. "I can see you now." Something slammed into the side of the truck and sent us skidding to a stop near a ravine. Then came the scraping. Not claws, not nails. Something harder, like bone dragging across the metal, moving deliberately from the front bumper to the back. It stopped beside my window. I turned my head slowly. There was no face in the glass, only my own reflection, until it smiled, wider than my mouth had ever moved, wider than a mouth should move at all. Then it lifted one finger on the other side of the glass and tapped once, asking to be let in. It stepped sideways, out of the reflection entirely, and a shape unfolded from the dark just beyond the window. Impossibly tall, impossibly thin. "Don't look at its face," Caleb whispered, eyes locked on the road, "because that's how it learns." The radio crackled to life on its own. My own voice came out of the speakers, perfectly copied. "Caleb, open the door. It's safe now." Then it laughed, because it knew we'd recognized it. Caleb ripped the radio out by the wires. The laughter didn't stop. It just moved outside, circling us. Then the truck dipped under a weight that climbed onto the roof. Footsteps slow and curious, each one followed by a faint, wrong-angled clicking, like joints bending the way they shouldn't. Then silence. Ahead in the road stood a coyote. Too thin, standing too straight, its eyes reflecting no light at all. It opened its mouth and spoke in Caleb's voice, "Ethan." Then its front legs bent backward with a series of sickening cracks, and it rose onto two legs, taller than the truck, arms hanging past its knees, head tilted at an angle no neck should allow. It smiled and started walking toward us, unhurried, certain, like something that had never lost anything it wanted to catch. Caleb floored it. The figure didn't move. We drove straight through where it stood, and the headlights passed through empty air. Nothing there. Nothing behind us either, just empty desert and a cloud of dust. Then Caleb whispered, "Don't look in the mirror." I looked anyway. Sitting in the back seat, where thousands of dollars of camera gear had been stacked seconds earlier, was a silhouette, hands folded neatly in its lap, face hidden in shadow. It leaned forward, close enough that I felt warm breath on the back of my neck and whispered in my own voice, "You finally looked." The truck swerved around oncoming headlights, and when I looked back, the seat was empty. Our gear was exactly where we'd left it. We didn't speak again until we reached a gas station, bright and ordinary and full of people who had never looked more comforting. Caleb went straight for the restroom. The cashier looked at me strangely. "You boys camping out there?" I nodded. He hesitated. "Then who's the third person?" I froze. "The tall one," he said, pointing at our truck, "standing in the bed of your pickup." I spun around. The truck was empty. When I turned back, his face had gone from confused to something closer to afraid. "Never mind," he said quietly. "I guess I was mistaken." We never spoke about that night again. Caleb sold his camera equipment within a week and moved across the country 6 months later without explaining why. I wish I could tell you it ended there, 3 nights ago, I woke up at exactly 2:17 a.m. to a single knock on my apartment door. No one was in the peephole. I stood there with my hand on the deadbolt while one voice begged me not to open it, and another, just as familiar, laughed softly and told me it was safe. Same breathing, same pauses, same fear. By sunrise, the hallway was empty, no footprints, no footage, and Caleb swore he'd been asleep in another state the whole night. Sometimes, just after midnight, I still hear a single knock. I never answer it, because if something can learn the voices of the people you love, how do you know you haven't already let it in?
How much do you know about skinwalkers? If you think they didn't exist, I must admit that I used to believe the same as you. But even if you think I'm crazy, I'll tell you that they are very real. And now, I will tell you when I saw one. That afternoon, I woke up 10 minutes before the alarm clock went off. The room was completely silent. My wife was away on a business trip and the house felt emptier than usual. I stretched out on the bed and struggled up, feeling the weight of the prosthesis on my right leg. It had been an accident at work, and although at first I liked the idea of not working, then I remembered that I couldn't do anything on crutches. The dog, Max, slept at the foot of the bed as usual, but something had made him nervous. He was growling a lot more than usual. At first, I thought he was just dreaming, but then he jumped up and ran out the basement door, barking. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Max's barking grew louder with each passing second. His claws scraped the wood as he tried to open it. There was nothing in the basement. Still, something made my dog, who usually didn't get upset over anything, react that way. I carefully climbed down and Max kept at my side, growling low. When I got to the basement, I turned on the light and looked around. Old boxes, tools, and forgotten furniture were still in place, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. "Max, there's nothing here." The dog was still restless, sniffing the air with bristling fur. I reached over and petted him to calm him down. Finally, he stopped growling, although he didn't relax completely. I decided he was paranoid for nothing. Maybe he had heard something on the street and had overreacted. I shrugged and went upstairs again, just as the alarm clock in my room began to go off. It was time to pick up my daughter from school. I trudged the 2 blocks to my daughter's school. Using crutches to get around was a bloody nightmare, especially in the summer heat. Still, I didn't complain. There was no time for regrets when I had a child depending on me.
"Dad, can I play with Max when we get home?"
"Of course, honey, but don't bother him too much." Something about the way Max had reacted earlier still bothered me, but I didn't want to worry her. When we got home, Max greeted us at the door, but something about him wasn't right. He didn't bark or jump as usual. Instead, he stood still, staring at us, almost as if he was studying every move we made. His gaze was fixed and penetrating, so much so that for a moment I thought he was behaving like a stranger. My daughter, however, didn't seem to notice.
"Come on, Max, let's go."
I stood in the hallway, watching the dog. Max didn't move an inch, his eyes still locked on me, as if he was waiting for something. I thought to myself that he was being ridiculous. Surely he wanted me to give him more food, and he must have thought I was mad about what happened in the basement, and this was his way of asking for forgiveness. After a few hours, I started to worry about Max. Every time I moved or made a noise, I could feel his eyes on me, as if he was watching me. Eventually, I decided to ignore him and focused on making dinner. After a few minutes, my daughter came downstairs for dinner. Max was following her closely, but not in his usual playful way. He stood by her side, now staring right at her.
"Dad, Max doesn't want to play with me. He just follows me around and stares at me."
"It's okay, honey. Maybe he's tired." As I was setting the table, the lights in the house flickered once and then went out completely. We were in complete darkness. "Stay here." I stood up and grabbed a flashlight from a nearby drawer. I turned it on and the light revealed Max's serious face, still watching us from the edge of the kitchen. My heart was pounding as I made my way to the basement. The only logical explanation was that the fuses had blown. As I reached the basement, I could hear a muffled sound, as if someone was moving around down there. This was no good. I couldn't go down there until I took action. I knew the best thing to do was to escape with my daughter, but maybe it was nothing, and if there was something, I had to take advantage of the fact that she was in the basement before she entered the house and hid somewhere. I know what everyone is thinking, and at the time, I didn't think about locking the man in the basement. But in a tight situation, no one can blame me for not doing the obvious. I told my daughter to go to her room, and I made sure the door to my daughter's room was securely locked and that Max was inside with her. "Hey, buddy, go take care of her, okay?" I went down to the basement with the flashlight, noticing that the sound had stopped. When I reached the top of the stairs, I shone the light on the stacked boxes and furniture. Suddenly, the flashlight picked up something on the floor. I cautiously moved forward and saw it clearly. It was Max. Or at least what was left of him. His body was mangled, his fur covered in dried blood. I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. That's when I heard my daughter scream from upstairs. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could, despite the pain in my leg. When I reached her bedroom door, I found it closed, but I could hear her crying on the other side. I pulled on the handle with all my strength, but it wouldn't budge. "Sweetie, I'm here. Open the door." I tried to hit it with my body again and again until it finally gave way. When the door opened, what I saw took my breath away. Behind the door was Max, only that wasn't Max. That thing was standing on two legs with the mouth stretched into an inhuman grimace, gripping my daughter's arm with its teeth. My daughter stood there, eyes wide open, panic reflected in her gaze. Her arm dangled weakly from the creature's mouth, but she didn't scream, as if fear had paralyzed her. I tried to move forward, but the creature lowered its gaze to the arm I held as if it was considering biting harder. The creature did not react like an animal. It did not recoil or show signs of fear. Instead, it let go of my daughter's arm, allowing her to collapse to the ground and get back on all fours. Before I could move, the creature gave a look that seemed to taunt me, and with one swift, brutal moment, grabbed my daughter around the waist with its jaw and jumped out the window. I heard the glass shatter into 1,000 pieces, and my daughter's piercing screams faded along with the beast. I was paralyzed. I fell to my knees, unable to get up, crutches falling at my side. I tried to crawl towards the window, but I knew it was no use. There was no way to follow that thing. All I had left was the image of my daughter being dragged by that creature. When the police arrived, I couldn't articulate anything coherent. I told them what had happened, every detail, but it all sounded absurd. They searched the entire house, searched the basement where they found Max's body, but when they inspected the outside, there was no sign of my daughter or the creature. The officers tried to console me, saying they would send out search teams and that they would do everything they could do to find her, but their eyes said otherwise. They didn't believe me. They thought I was out of my mind, that I had done something with my daughter after I lost my mind. My daughter never appeared. They searched for days but found nothing, not a trace, not a clue. The case remained unsolved, and eventually the search stopped. I'm in a psychiatric hospital now. They say I'm here for my good, to protect me from myself. But I know the truth. I know that what I saw that night was real. My daughter was taken away by something that shouldn't exist, and no one believes me. I've been told that my wife stopped visiting me, unable to bear the thought that I've lost my mind, that I've done something to my daughter. The night they brought me here, I overheard the doctors talking among themselves. They think it was all a figment of my imagination. A nervous breakdown brought on by the stress of the accident. No one will ever believe me. I can't stop thinking about what happened to my daughter and where she might be now if she's still alive. I will never know. Sometimes I try to pretend that what happened was a lie, but it's getting harder and harder for me to say logical things. I guess I'm losing my mind. Although I often wonder, did this start happening before or after that night?
What is the strangest thing that has ever happened to you? Have you ever found something that threw away everything you believed? Something that you were convinced was just fables? Let me tell you that it has happened to me and my friends, but unfortunately, I am the only one who can tell the story. It all started with an invitation that no one expected. Jason, one of the more reserved guys in our group, suggested we spend the weekend at his cabin in the woods. He had never been the type to share his stuff. His cabin was his sanctuary, and he rarely talked about it. So we were all surprised when he proposed the plan. At first, we thought maybe he just wanted to unwind a bit, get away from the city, and take the opportunity to relax with friends. But there was something a bit odd about his attitude. Jason had always been a bit of a control freak, worried about someone breaking something or messing up his place. This time, however, he was strangely relaxed, almost excited about the idea of us all going. His change in attitude did not go unnoticed, but no one said anything. After all, maybe this was a unique opportunity we could never have again. So we agreed, and the plan stood. The trip was uneventful. We drove for a few hours until we reached the place. The cabin was in the middle of nowhere and was surrounded by a dense forest that we didn't know how far it extended. As soon as we arrived, Jason insisted that we explore the forest, but we were all tired from the trip. We told him we'd better do it the next day. He seemed a bit disappointed, which caught our attention even more. He was never one of those adventurous people who liked to get out of the house. Although at the time we were surprised for the best, maybe Jason wasn't as boring as we thought. We settled in, prepared some food, and started drinking. Laughter and stories took over the night, but there was something about Jason that got on my nerves. Every time I met his eyes, I felt like he was watching me in a strange way, like he was analyzing me. It was unsettling, but I laughed it off. Jason just laughed but continued to stare when I didn't see him. We stayed in the cabin even though Jason kept suggesting we go out into the woods. I could tell he wasn't happy with our decision to stay inside. Soon after, we all went to bed. We would have all the next morning to explore, although I wouldn't sleep that night. I woke up in the middle of the night with a strange feeling, as if someone was watching me. And there he was, Jason in his bed, staring at me from across the room. His eyes seemed to glow in the dark as if reflecting the little light that came through the window. He didn't blink, didn't move a muscle. He just looked at me. I wanted to ask him what he was doing, but I felt strangely intimidated by my friend I had known since I was a kid. I looked down, trying to ignore him, and leaned back. I didn't want to appear paranoid. Maybe I was overreacting, or maybe Jason had had too much to drink. The next day, I woke up again to the screams of my friends. It was 4 a.m. I felt a momentary relief that Jason wasn't looking at me this time. However, when I went out to the dining room, I found my friends upset. One of them, Mark, was pale and shaking. "Hey man, are you okay?" "We couldn't find Jason or Tommy." It was at that moment that they told me everything. A few minutes before, one of them woke up to a noise and noticed that our friends were not there. We waited for them for a while, but they didn't come back. We looked all over the cabin. Their things were still there, which made everything stranger. If they had gone for a walk, why didn't they call? Didn't they take anything with them? Why would they be out at this hour? We decided to go to the forest to look for them. After a while, we heard a scream from the trees in the distance. It was Tommy's voice. We ran in the direction where the scream came from, but when we arrived, the scene we found was as horrible as it was unexpected. Tommy's body was lying on the ground, gutted. But what was most disturbing was that, based on the condition of the body, it appeared to have been dead for several hours. We didn't understand how we could have heard his screams so clearly. In the distance, through the trees, I saw a figure moving quickly. It was Jason. He was moving deeper and deeper into the forest. We called his name, but he didn't respond. He just kept going as if he hadn't seen Tommy's body. We started to follow him at full speed. We had no idea we were heading into a trap. We moved deeper and deeper into the forest, but soon realized that we were losing Jason's trail. The atmosphere was getting darker, and a strange smell of damp earth and blood surrounded us. To be honest, I just wanted to get out of there. I was terrified. I couldn't stay another second in that place, and neither my friends. But we couldn't leave Jason like that, not after what had happened to Tommy. Suddenly, the sound of branches snapping all around us put us on alert. It was as if something big was moving through the trees. That wasn't Jason. That's when we saw it. Jason appeared again, but this time he wasn't walking like a normal person. He was moving like a spider, his limbs bent unnaturally as he glided along the ground. It couldn't be him. Something was wrong. Before we could react, he jumped on one of my friends, sinking his teeth into his neck. Blood splattered as my friend fell to the ground, dead in seconds. Unable to react to what was in front of us, Mark and I ran directionless, running deeper and deeper into the woods. I could hear my friend screaming in the distance, begging me not to leave him behind. None of this made any sense. That being identical to Jason had bitten his neck and killed him, there was no way he was screaming at us. Suddenly, a strange being appeared in our path. It wasn't Jason, but it wasn't something I recognized either. His pale skin and empty eyes made him look like a nightmare come true. Recognize that being. I was always a big fan of urban legends, and this being was just like the one in the Skinwalker photo that had been popularized on the internet. We didn't have time to stop and think, we just knew we had to run. We turned in another direction, trying to escape from this monster. Every time I looked back, I couldn't see anything, but I could hear it. That thing that was chasing us was closing the distance. With a stroke of luck, I reached the cabin and found the truck. But when I got there, I realized I was alone. Mark was gone. I didn't even want to think that something had happened to him or that he was lost. I got into the truck and was about to accelerate it. Then I heard it. It was Mark's voice, and it was coming from the woods. He was yelling at me in desperation, asking me to wait for him, not to leave without him, that he was being chased. At that moment, I had to make a decision. These beings were imitating the voices of my friends, but what if this was Mark? I couldn't make a decision. If I was wrong, my friend would die. I thought quickly as I listened to the voice getting closer and closer, and that's when I made the most impulsive decision I've ever made in my life. I started the engine and accelerated the truck as fast as I could. I drove without stopping, fear still pulsing in my veins. I didn't look back once, afraid to see Jason or the other monster chasing me, or at least that's what I told myself. What I was really afraid of was seeing Mark, and knowing that I made the wrong decision. The road back to town seemed endless, but I finally reached a safer area where I could stop and try to figure out what had happened. I tried to call the police, but my phone had no signal in that area. It was then that reality hit me like a bucket of cold water. I had left my friends behind, with no idea what had happened to them. Guilt and fear hit me hard, but I knew I couldn't go back. What I had seen in the forest was not of this world, and I could not face it again. I had already escaped. Why would I go back? To die like them? I survived, and that's a lot more than what had to have happened. When I finally got through to the authorities, I told them what had happened, even though I knew they wouldn't believe me. I was surprised when they told me that they had received similar reports in that area in the past. It seems that in the area around the cabin, they were much more open to these things than I was, although they still reported what happened as disappearances. They only found Jason's corpse, so I don't know if that voice was Mark's. To this day, I still wonder if I made the right decision, although given the circumstances, I suppose there was no right decision. They were just decisions, and I made the decision that made me be here now, alive, and telling you this story. Oh, and one more thing. Remember I told you that they found Jason's body? Because of that body, the police suspected me for a moment and thought I was lying to them. Do you know why? Because they found out that that body had been dead longer than the one I told them about. You know what that means, don't you? That he was with us, that he invited us to the cabin. It wasn't Jason, and it never was.